Welcome to the Independent Characters. This is Carl.
This is Jody.
And this is episode 201, Surviving the Apocalypse.
We are going to be doing that by the time we're done tonight.
By the time we are done, we have had a long day of gaming, but it's been a good one.
Yep.
And we've gone all through Apocalypse. And we'll have, our thoughts, our views, kind of talk about how the game works, et cetera, because it is a game.
Yes, indeed.
Meaning it is not 40K. It is a different game.
Yeah, it's its own animal.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So we're going to go over that. But first thing we wanted to do was announce our show sponsor from our Patreon is none other than Jake Rossler. Jake, thank you so much for your support. You've been a long-time supporter, as I can see. Absolutely appreciate your support. If you're interested in joining our Patreon, you can find information at theindependentcharacters.com or go to our Patreon page, which is in the show notes.
There it is.
So there you go. So we already talked about what we're going to talk about this episode. Let's launch into Elite Choice. Jody, why don't you go first?
All right.
I forgot to mention one thing.
Yeah.
You may notice neither Jody.
Hi.
Hey, Jody's here. You may notice that neither Justin, there's too many J's. If we get a Joe, they're out. Like, that's it. Somebody has to go. If Joe's really cool, somebody's going by the wayside. Justin is not here. Obviously, he messaged last night saying didn't realize he had a conflict. It's his kid's birthday, so happy birthday to Jax.
Yeah.
But also, Adon has been very ill.
Yeah,
so
Nurgling's got him.
He with all the flying he does, I'm surprised he's not sick more often. So it's just Jody and I, which is it's great. That's all you need.
There you go.
That easy.
Or sorry.
Yeah.
Whichever one it is.
The two independent characters.
Lone Rangers.
All right, what do you got for your Elite Choice this episode?
Well, since it's just the two of us, I'm going to double dip and cheat.
I should have done that.
First off, I just want to thank a number of people who chimed in on the community page that participated along with us on the challenge, our new segment. Oh, yeah. And people were keeping pace and looking forward to see you finish up by the time you are listening to this episode. I'm looking forward to seeing other folks finish.
Sometimes, in some cases, they were outpacing some of us.
Some of us, that may be true of. But my true singular Elite Choice is actually to a new poster in the community group. Nicholas Daniels, welcome aboard. And man, what an entrance. He's been posting pictures of his Storm Riders White Scars Successor chapter. In particular, I believe his chapter masters, the most recent one I noticed that he posted. It is just a fantastic Primaris conversion. Yep. Some really outstanding work on true metallics. There's a good shine to these, as well as still playing with, light and shadow and not just shading one tone. Some really excellent freehand with silver armor with this blue and white trim. And then
love the color scheme.
Bit with these giant plumes on the back. Just really captured a unique take on what a White Scars Successor chapter might look like. And I'm always impressed when somebody comes up with their own chapter, but it feels as though it always was part of canon. These guys absolutely the Storm Riders absolutely look like, if I saw them in a book or on the cover of a novel or somebody writing about them, I'd be like, of course those are, when somebody's like, oh, it's my Humpty Dumpty Marines. I'm like, probably not canon.
My Humpty Dumpty.
Truth or fan fiction a little bit there. And these guys would pass as truth, right?
Yeah,
they're really fantastic. So great job and welcome, Nicholas. Looking forward to seeing more posts as this force evolves. Really good stuff.
Well, it's kind of beginner's luck this go around because Craig Taylor, who had just joined in, I want to say like January 23rd, had joined the group, made his first post, and he posted an amazing Great Unclean one. I mean, the colors are sharp on this thing. They are they're definitive. They show a lot of color variation. There's purples in there along with the greens, and it's this really subtle transition that I really, really dig. And I love the verdigris on the bell that the guy's carrying and stuff, and just everything about this model I think looks fantastic. So
the highlighting around the maw and the belly is super nice.
And the green slime in the mouth.
And there's some fleshy tones kind of modulated around the sores. So he's got that kind of pallid green for most of the skin, but those real subtle kind of fleshy tones on the tears.
Yeah.
It's great stuff.
Just really, really solid. So congratulations to both of you. Thank you for sharing your work on the Facebook group. If you are not a member of the Facebook group, you are missing out because we see stuff like this all the time. It's just a fantastic community. So, well, I think we should take a short break, come right back, and then launch into hobby progress.
We got some. Let's do it.
We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Big Nasty B from Life After the Cover Safe, and I'm at a mall talking to strangers about Table War. Table War develops some of the most innovative products for the miniature wargaming and hobby industry.
And I develop pictures.
That's great. They develop things like the Fat Mat.
Who's Matt, and why is he so fat?
Well, first off, Mat is not a person. The Fat Mat is a tabletop gaming surface, and with over 40 different designs, Table War's Fat Mat has become a community standard.
I got the Surface Pro. It's like 10 inches. By the way, I'm meeting my friend Simbon. Do you know what that is?
No, but I do want to tell you about the Table War Tower case line.
Oh man, towers are so huge.
Well, it's not that kind of tower. It's the original modular, all-in-one display storage and transport system for all your tabletop miniatures.
Wow, you're really smart. What's your relationship status?
Well, it's complicated, but you know what isn't complicated?
Chili dogs.
This is true, but also the Macromat.
Oh geez, not that guy again.
The Macromat is a one-of-a-kind, innovative photography backdrop, perfect for collectibles, hobby miniatures, and small works of art. Its durability, portability, and functionality in one inexpensive product.
I wasn't paying attention to what you just said, but do you validate parking?
No, I do not. But if you want more information, head over to tablewar.com and check them out.
Table War!
All right, and we're back. We're going to kick it off with a little bit of hobby progress, as usual. I'll go ahead and go first.
Let her rip.
All right. I have kind of been singularly focused on painting my Black Legion Terminators. They are, I think, coming out great.
Yep.
And I will talk about whether I succeeded or failed the challenge in just a little bit. But I've also spent a lot of time reading as I'm going to bed or whatever, the first 3 books of the Siege of Terra series. So the first book was by John French, second book was by Guy Haley, and the third book is by Gav Thorpe. And I'm almost done with the third book. I'm actually on the last couple chapters of the third book. But I got to tell you, and I talked about this during our Patreon episode, like every author here is bringing out their A game.
Oh, good.
And like like you can tell that they have spent time in meetings discussing like, here's the beats of the thing. Here's how everything's going to go. There's some fantastic uses of story building in some of these. It's Guy Haley's best book, I think.
Wow.
I really, really believe that. As I got towards the end, like Shell was trying to go to sleep and I was reading in bed and I would get towards the climax of the novel. And I'd be like, oh my God, that is really cool. And Shell's like, could you please keep it down? I'm trying to sleep. I'm like, okay, sorry. Oh my God, that's really cool. I mean, imagine, the Siege of Minas Tirith. 100-fold.
On a planetary scale.
Yeah. It's just incredible.
That's really good to hear.
And you really get the sense of scale. At least I did.
They've said how many books this is going to be. It's 8 books.
And so that brings me to my next point, which is it's supposed to be 8 solid books, yet they released a Siege of Terra novella by Graham McNeil, which was not part of the original plan. And while Graham McNeil's a great guy, like he was not one of the authors that I saw on the list of authors that were going to be writing for this. And now all of a sudden there's like an extra book. And I really debated. I got it, of course. But I seriously debated, do I want to buy this thing or not?
Right.
Because I was like, you committed to 8 books. And now all of a sudden we've got a 9th novella. And I'm like, but I just feel like I'm getting the whole collection of the special editions. And I didn't want it to be left out. But I kind of don't feel like it's part of the core thing. Right. I don't know. I'll read it and I'll let you know. But I really, I don't want to say bait and switch. I think that's a little strong, right?
Yeah.
But don't let the colors bleed outside the lines.
Right.
Like stay focused on what you're doing.
Yeah. I get you when it's like this, like, hey, this collectible very specific thing. And I mean, admittedly, you can pick up the novels however you need to pick up the novels, but when something has that, it's going to be this run and this is what we're doing. And then there's like, oh, and then there's the fan fiction series on the side.
Right.
But we're endorsing it. It's like, it kind of cheapens takes a
Don't-
little shine away.
Yeah. So I'm a little, I bought it, but I'm a little put
Well,
off
hopefully
by
it's good. Hopefully it's
I
good.
hope it's good. I hope it's good. Look, maybe it'll tide me over till the next one gets here because I cannot wait for the fourth book. I'm blown away by the first two.
That's so good. I mean, for such a iconic piece of 40K lore, this has to be done right. And
so big.
And I'm saying that as somebody who is pretty open about. I don't read Black Library really. It's not.
Yeah.
It's tough for me to get into, and certainly appreciate that it's out there. But man, if there was ever something that I was like, no, this has to be really done well. So
Well,
that's
the
good to
first
hear
one
that
is a
they're killing
solar war, and it deals all with as all the ships are coming in a Sol system and they're defending and fighting and retreating back to Earth effectively. Right. And then the second one is the Lost and the Damned, and it's so brutal. It's so brutal. Like, it was good. And the third one's called The First Wall. So
There you go.
It's good. Good stuff.
That's good.
Okay, so that's what I've been doing. What have you been doing?
Hobby.
Lot.
Yeah, it's been a busy for only being 2 weeks. I've been busy because I'm back to work too. So doing the shaping minds and burning midnight oil, reading bad essays, and doing what I do. But I did commit myself to going
fan fiction on classic literature.
Yeah, pretty much on good days. I wanted to get the Shadow Spear box done, so that became my number one priority. And I did. I got the Venom Crawler totally finished. Man, what a cool model.
It looks fantastic.
Thanks. I love that model. It's creepy and all the right. Does it? And I don't mean to bring it does?
Yep.
Okay.
But I mean, you know what? Like, okay, the spider thing. That's what you're going to bring up.
That's what I'm going to bring up.
Again, and I'm going to say this.
Right. And that's why I was hesitant.
I'm not even joking. You want to get kicked out of the group.
Right. It's not funny.
I don't find it amusing.
No, and that's why I was curious. Like, it's creepy and it's
I'm super arachnophobic.
Genuinely, yeah.
And but because I am in games like Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of thing, I always use like spiders as like
gotcha
monsters that you're fighting against. But yeah, I mean, like, okay, so I used to use for miniatures. I used to have these little plastic spiders that I'd gotten from some 5 and dime shop or whatever.
Sure.
And every now and then, like, one would be laying out on the table, and I freak out about it. Like, the Venom Crawler's different enough that it doesn't, but I certainly get that.
It gives you
that's
that
a creepy vibe.
Yeah, that's cool. Have you heard the thing about, I don't know, or just I'm going to share it for listeners too. There's a great little behind the scenes story from The Hobbit, or no, Lord of the Rings, that when Peter Jackson apparently is arachnophobic.
Okay.
And when they were working on Shelob for the end of the Lord of the Rings, the giant spider, and they were CGI rendering it, he'd keep coming in and being like, no.
Not until it freaked him out.
And then like walked in one day, was like, I have to leave. Yeah, it's fine. And that was literally the thing, is like he walked in and was like, no, I can't look at it. And then left. And they were like, okay, got it.
I get it.
So
me and Peter.
Great. There you go.
Brothers in 8 legs.
8-legged creepies. So yeah, the Venom Crawler, it's just a fun model to paint. It found myself tempted to take on another one, but since I'm only painting the Shadow Spear box, I literally nobody believing that online. The Master Possession was the last thing to get done.
Yeah. And
I intentionally held him till the last. What a fantastic model.
It's incredible.
Darren Latham just killed it when he sculpted that guy. It is everything that like my little junior high death metal, not even death metal,
amazing,
but like butt rock metal, like lame metal self wanted it to be. I mean, he's holding like a goat's head with a pentagram carved in the forehead.
Yeah.
Even his rules like tie into all that like creepy possession-y stuff. Really actually got halfway through painting him and had to almost start over because I didn't like the direction it was going. I ended up doing a flesh cape on him. That
was the model that when they shared the image of it, I was just, oh my God, that's the most amazing chaos thing I've seen in a long time. I was blown away by it.
Yep. Grimdark at its grimdarkiest. And
it's almost sad that I'm using one as a test model, but I have multiples of them.
So. There you go. It's a great, it's just a cool model in the backpack and the whole deal. And then in preparation for playing Apocalypse, I realized as I was like settling in last week to do the challenge models, the 5 Crimson Fist Terminators that I ended up taking on, I started in the back of my mind. I was like, all right, I got to get all my orcs ready for our APOC game today. And it occurred to me that Matt had asked me to do rebasing a while back. Mm-hmm. And one day I sat down and just started clipping boys off bases. And I got about 90 of them off their bases. So Wednesday of this week, I realized I had boys that literally didn't have the wrong base. They had no base.
And you were going to play Apocalypse.
And I was going to play Apocalypse today. And I went, uh-oh. And I got to finish the challenge. So I spent a good number of hours on Wednesday evening with glue and bases. Luckily, we had that's our club day meetup at the school.
Yeah.
So I just showed up with some glue and a big bag of bases. Matt helped me do a handful of them, which was good because he got me into this mess. So I still need to do the proper basing and painting.
They're just on the black.
They're just on the black base, which I still really like. If black is the right color rim for your bases, then maybe just all black is. No. Yeah, I can't do it. I got too much invested in that army, but it actually didn't bug me too much today. Sorry if it bugged you.
Did not.
Oh, see, it's good. It works.
I didn't even notice there was so much stuff on the table.
That we had some models out. Anyway, but that was my progress. Got some stuff done, and we'll talk about the challenge.
All right, now actually. So let's talk about the challenge. So this is a new segment. Last episode, we set forth that, hey, we are going to do this unit this time. Let's see how it goes, right? Mm-hmm. And if you did not complete that unit, and the unit we chose was 5 Terminators.
Right. Ended up being way more specific than I thought, but cool.
And if you didn't complete it, you get ridiculed by the rest of the group. Fortunately, I'm only going to get ridiculed by one person.
Yeah, you lucked out on that.
And it's going to be Jody. Justin posted pictures of the Terminators he did. Of course, he finished his Terminators. I did not. Now, I did get very far through my Terminators. Here's where I may have bit off more than I could chew and why I didn't succeed. And I feel like, I'm telling you, like, I burned the midnight oil trying to get these as far as I could. And then the other problem was I found myself rushing to get them done and then not being happy with certain aspects of what I was doing because I didn't want to rush through it. So anyway, most people would probably consider them done and put them on the table at this point, other than the fact they're not on a base. Well, they are sort of. They're just on plastic bases. I have to finish the resin bases. Mm-hmm. I had not settled on my basing scheme. I have now, but like as I decided to do the challenge, like I hadn't settled on what I was going to do across the whole army for a basing scheme. So it forced me to make a decision there. I completely forgot that I need to do the decals. I am not the best at doing decals, and Colin walked me through how to do them, and so I haven't gotten to that piece. Right, there were just a lot of things I didn't consider as I went through. Like I hadn't quite planned out some of the painting I was going to do, mm-hmm. and so I found myself now just having to make decisions where I wasn't just able to go do the thing. And then the one other thing, and this is the one other thing I'll throw out there. Justin gave me an idea for how to do the eyes, mm-hmm. and which is, a bit of cream, and then put in Tamiya red for just a drop of Tamiya red, and I was struggling. I talked about this on the Patreon episode. I was struggling a lot as I'm getting older. My eyesight is going, and it is getting harder and harder for me to see like the very, very minute. I need to get some kind of magnifying system going on.
Yep.
And so I felt like I was screwing the eyes up, like I was not at all happy. And then fortunately, Justin told me the other day, he's like, don't forget to do like the isopropyl alcohol and the Payne's Gray and just put it in there. As soon as I did that, that solved the problem. It's like, oh, thank God.
Right. Set those dark rims still around the eye.
So I failed. I have no excuse. I cannot tell you how upsetting it is for me.
Well, didn't you pick the first challenge?
Yep.
Wasn't this your choice?
It was.
For 5 Terminators.
For 5 Terminators.
I thought we were just going to do an elite choice, and you wanted specifically 5 Terminators.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
and you hadn't considered your basing scheme for your army as part of this process.
I'm a dumbass. What can I say?
I think that covers it.
Also,
I feel like it's a good start.
Also, I was doing 6. I actually did HQ and Terminator armor at the same time. Maybe if I'd cut him out, I might have saved a little bit. But
a little bit of time.
But
what you got looks nice.
Yep.
It's good. It's good.
It's
and
progress.
You drilled out your barrels.
I did drill out the barrels.
Got a little stick about that along the way.
Yep.
Which is why I wasn't posting work in progress pictures along the way.
I am very, very happy now that like some of the details are coming together on the models. I'm super happy with the way the armor came out. Like I'm really pleased with the grays that I put onto the black armor. I think it's exactly what I wanted. I love the golds on the armor as well. And then when it's all kind of coming together, I'm very, very happy with the results.
There you go.
I just need to get it done.
Now the decals are going to be that kind of classic bright yellow, yeah?
No, they actually have provided kind of newer, updated Black Legion decals that are like I think they have some golds in them and stuff. They look really cool.
Oh, cool.
And they're better detailed, like way better detailed.
Yeah. So speaking of decals, so I put for mine, I would say I completed the challenge.
You did.
Ish.
Nope.
For me, it's ish. And the reason it's ish is I rushed as well because I was running short on time. And
I'm wondering if this is the right segment, if we're rushing. Like I don't.
But
it
for
did
me,
get me further than
I had the dark blue base coat on these Crimson Fists for maybe almost a year.
Okay.
And I just kept hemming and hawing about I want him to be this, I want him to be that. And, you know, when you and I stopped midway through our game today and went and grabbed lunch, we talked about, you know, just get it done.
Yeah.
Just get it done.
Yeah.
Like, get the paint on the model, get it finished. So I love that this instigated that.
Okay.
Because the only reason I painted 5 Terminators was to have a second Terminator squad to play Space Hulk with.
All right.
That was it. So I wouldn't have got these done, frankly, if not for the challenge. So I love it for that. That like, hey, this thing's done and it's playable. And I think that is a positive that I can get excited about. That like, you know what? No matter what we're gonna do this thing, and we're gonna get it. I'm gonna try to get this done in the next 2 weeks. This one thing.
Okay.
So I think it's worthwhile, even if it means rushing a little bit. But you know, the reality is, I'm gonna probably go back. One of the things I didn't get done on these guys is I was inspired by the original Space Hulk box art, like the panels around the outside of the boxes from the 80s style boxes. And it showed all these different Terminators on the outside of the box. And one of them was this really interesting take on Crimson Fist, where they have like black and red hazard stripes on the back of their power fists, which is kind of unusual. But then on the knuckle of the power fist, there's the classic yellow and black powers, like in an opposite direction.
Right.
So this little trim piece. I really wanted to do that extra detail and then put a campaign badge that I put on the first squad I did, Black Templars. Mm-hmm. So they're done. And the decals ended up okay. And that was partly because I was using old decals. So when you mentioned that like the new ones are much cleaner and much crisper detail, and these were Assault on Blackreach transfers.
Yeah, those are ways.
And they're thicker. Mm-hmm. They're much more fragile. Like I've really noticed a huge increase in the quality of decals from GW.
I've just seen Colin put on, like he came over and showed me how to put on decals, and he was putting on decals on before he sold it his Adeptus Custodes army, and like he was putting on those big beautiful decals that go on the hover tanks on the front, and I was like, my God, you made that look easy. You know? Right. And I've never been like, I'm before I go the decals on this, and this is again part of what I realized, maybe I bit off more than I could chew for this 2-week period, was I need to put some decals on some test models to make sure I do it right before I start pushing towards a model that I want to use going forward. Right.
And for me, it was, I didn't take and see, that's the funny thing about rushing is I didn't take the 5 minutes to get up, walk out to my garage where I have most of my like crafting hobby supplies, get my microsol, come back and sit down. And for those who don't know, microsol is just a decal solvent. It helps soften them. So on a big round surface, I cut the slits in them like I know to do, so that the round decal will fold over itself and lay flat. But didn't get out the microsol, and it cost me. And I was like, gosh darn it. And in a weird way, it kind of looks cool. They look a little battle damaged now, and I can live with it. I can live with it. It's for what they're intended for use for. Right. They're not going into an army. They're They're game pieces for Space Hulk. They also went on 32 millimeter bases.
I saw that. Yeah.
And it's because so they'll fit on the board better. Right. They also have this weird kind of greeny cream colored base because that's the old original.
It's intended to reflect the old style of
Yeah. And when they're on the board, it looks right. It looks like they're supposed to be there. So are we doing this again?
Well, I think we are, but we're not doing it this episode.
Okay.
Because I need to finish the Terminators.
Okay.
I will have the Terminators done before next episode. Okay. And then we need to decide what unit is next.
Well, I think I get to choose since I'm the only one here who finished.
I think that is correct.
Okay.
Do you have something in mind already?
Maybe.
Okay.
That's a no.
Okay. Well, you think about it.
I'm gonna-
We'll do it again next. And if it's 10 troops, great. If it's 5, whatever. If it's a vehicle, sure.
Right.
Pick what you want.
Okay.
We'll go from there.
I'm into it. I'll come up with something good. Like I said, I like the idea of it being a little more general, but I think whoever's picking should get to
I'm
make the
down
call.
with that too.
Cool.
I'm down with you
Also,
generalizing it.
Taking a quick second here to give Justin his props. He did
Oh,
get
he
done.
killed it.
He killed it. It looks great. Dude, Justin, love those bases. If folks, if you haven't checked them out, go look.
He's posted them on the Facebook group.
They're on the group. He did them in the color scheme of the Purge. And I know that's something I feel like he's talked about a number of times. So I'll be anxious when he's back with us to
actually see him,
to hear his breakdown and get to see him. But kudos to you, man. That you were excited, and your excitement was contagious for me. I knew I had to press on through. So way to go, man. Those look sharp.
Yeah.
And Adon, better luck next time. Good luck.
Get better.
Get better, and stay away from the Nurglings, buddy.
Yeah, his Terminators look really, really solid.
Really sharp. Yeah, I can't tell if they're decals. Well, kudos to you. There it is. I can't tell if they're decals or freehand at the pictures he posted.
Yeah.
I think
and I know
they're
he's
freehand.
experimenting with some new AK stuff, like
Yeah.
for weathering and that kind of stuff. But man,
Yeah, it was great.
Justin's a talented dude, man.
Yeah, he is unlocked
And he did,
the
and
code.
like I said, his advice helped me out with that Payne's Gray mixed with isopropyl. As soon as I put it in there, I was like, oh, look at that. And then I started looking at the model. I'm like, where else can I put this liner, right? Because I did it on some of the axes and stuff. The handles of the axes it looks really good.
Right. Yeah, that's actually the only thing I've noticed. If I'm going to do my me thing that I can't help, I have the worst habit. Like, you didn't ask for feedback. Can I give you feedback?
Yeah,
on it?
please do.
Okay. It feel like on the gold to black transition,
Yeah.
because the way you highlighted the black, like you could almost get a true black line
Around right around the black. I thought about playing
and
with
really
that.
set that golden black off. And in a weird way, it would really help set the black. It's another step that's
I
not
thought
an
about that
insignificant
using
step.
the same stuff.
Yeah,
right?
but use a true black.
Oh, you think?
For just like around the armor, the gold trim on the armor and the plates, I think you could create a little more definition.
Let me see what I can do.
Yeah.
I'm willing to try that.
Pin wash.
I actually thought about that. And originally I was going to do oil washes on the whole thing, and I've kind of foregone that because I actually like the way the armor's looking.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to do I wouldn't think an all over wash would be worthwhile.
But I agree with you. Actually, I think doing the pin stuff will work out well.
Yeah, I'd
So I'll give it a go, and we'll take a look. No, thanks for the suggestion. Okay, let's talk games played. So I don't think I talked. Did I talk last episode about going down to Blake and Ed's for their 24-hour thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll get rid of that one. I walked them through some Kill Team. They had never played Kill Team before, and so I kind of stood by and helped them through that. But it sounds like I already talked about that. Then the only game I've gotten in, honestly, has been the game of Apocalypse we played today.
I only had one other game than that, and so let me do this one, and then we'll talk a little bit about our APOC game.
And I do have one other thing to mention
Okay.
In the hobby realm. Can
Let's
I jump to that real quick?
Yeah, let's do that.
So the other thing is Mason, who you may remember, a bunch of people sent Dark Angel stuff to Mason. He always wanted to play Tyranids. And like from the get-go, he was very interested in my Tyranids. As he came over the other week, he played my Tyranids with me. I think I talked about that last episode. Anthony Robidart, our very good friend Anthony, who's local, had, after Mason went and spent some of his Christmas money to buy like a getting started box for Tyranids, Anthony basically gave him just a huge army of Tyranids, completely unassembled, all on sprues in a box, no bases, which, by the way, GW doesn't sell slotted bases anymore, which you need for Gaunts. And also, it just like he just gave him just a ton of stuff.
Wow. Way to go, man.
Another listener also sent some stuff. I don't know if he wants me saying his name, so I won't at the moment. But another listener also sent over a bunch of stuff he didn't want. So Mason is set. Please, nobody else send any Tyranids. Like I had to ask his mom, is it okay to give him this stuff?
Wow.
Because it was hundreds of dollars worth of Tyranids. And Mason is like, apparently he goes home, shuts himself in his room, and just starts gluing Tyranids together.
That's praise the high mind. So I just looked back at episode 200.
Yeah.
I don't see anything about it there. I remember talking about it, but I don't.
Yeah, all right. That's all right.
Okay.
You mean Blake and its 24-hour stream for
Yeah.
Life After the Cover Save?
Yeah.
We drove down there, Tom, myself, and Doug. Spent half of the live stream with him. Adon had already left by the time we got there. I guess he came out for the morning. It was fun. But I walked him through a game of Kill Team. They had not ever played before. They had painted up during that 24-hour period to Kill Team
Oh, sweet.
armies. And so I walked them through how to play it because they had no clue how to play it. They don't really play 40K anymore. So, it was fun.
Right on.
Yeah. And then I collected my my Goliath gang
Oh, right.
from Ed, who finally finished it up, and I love it.
Yeah, it looks
It's awesome. I did play a game of Necromunda. I completely forgot.
That's
played
where I heard it. We had the Necromunda Day.
Yes, we had Necromunda Day where we were building terrain and stuff, and I actually played an intro game of Necromunda with Josh, right? Or was it with you?
Wasn't with me. I didn't.
It was
play
with
that.
Josh.
Okay.
Josh walked me through how to play it again because I've only played a couple times.
Right.
And once you get playing, it's pretty.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward once you start playing. I mean, there's a lot of little things to it, but it was fun. I liked the Goliath gang. Make great use of smoke grenades because that's the tip I got from Dan and Campbell. And over the 40K Badcast, if you're going to use assault army, you want to throw those smoke grenades so you're not getting shot up, getting towards your opponent. But yeah, fun game. I'm looking forward to our campaign.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. In fact, now that I've kind of cleared the queue for getting ready to play today and meeting the challenge requirement, actually, I'm kind of glad we're not immediately rolling into one because in typical way to overcomplicate it fashion, I've completely scrapped the gang I was going to go with, and I'm building a big gang from scratch.
Okay.
So I got some painting to do.
And I just did those Goliaths, and now they just announced a new Goliath book with like Juves and all this stuff.
All kinds of crazy
stuff.
stuff.
Oh my God. All right, great. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, GW.
I love Games Workshop.
And they're awesome stuff that keeps coming from the heroes.
Anyway.
All right. So I played one other game.
Yes.
Matt and I played a 40 power level game, and I got to use my brand new Shadow Spear starter set Iron Warrior Force for the first time. Played against his Death Watch forces, and he rolled out 40 power level. It was the first time for me playing against the new bells and whistles Primaris Space Marines all loaded up. He only has one squad of Primaris dudes. In my mind, I was still thinking,
Marines.
two wound Marines. Who cares? Yeah, that was a terrible mistake. Somewhere around turn 2, I realized this is going to go poorly. They do what? Jaw on the floor. And first off, I got to apologize to Matt, this is a little bit weird and ironic because, sorry, buddy, I got a little bit like poopy pants at the end of the game. Like I got sad faced about it and started griping about rules and things. And man, which is funny.
Do what?
Yeah, there was wait a minute. That seems good. Okay, cool. Great. Good for them. So I apologize that I wasn't a better
Marines are no
sport
joke
about it.
right now, man.
No, as indicated by what is it, like the last however many majors have been just dominated by them. But it was ironic because actually this kind of ties into two things. I was watching the recent episode of Goobertown Hobbies, and he was talking about that he chimed in and was watching the Life After the Cover Save guys do their live stream.
Yeah.
And like he was chiming in and maybe talking to somebody there or something.
Yeah.
What was going on. Because he does these 24-hour marathon hobby things.
I don't know how you do 24 hours. And they're so dumb. I love those guys. And they know Ed knows. The brains of that outfit knows.
That doesn't bode well.
They're both highly intelligent.
I know.
But starting at midnight to record to the following midnight is a terrible idea. Why would you not start at like 9 in the morning,
right?
10 in the morning after you've had a full night's sleep, set up everything, and then go. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to push through to 9 the next morning. At least you're coming off of a full night's sleep. I think Blake, by the end of it, he was so cranky. And because he'd been up like 34 hours. And I'm like,
Brent called that out on his 24-hour stream. He's like, "Oh, rookie move starting at midnight.
Yep.
That was bad."
Yep, for sure.
So the Goobertown, YouTube show, he always tries to really keep it positive and about learning and about giving back to the community. And
Until about hour 18.
But in his recent episode, he literally talks about doing some community feedback and like giving back to the community. And he talks about some of his personal views. He shouts out the Badcast guys for calling it like they see it, politically or socially or otherwise. And it was interesting because on episode 200, I had talked about trying to be a better gamer just as a person in the complete sense of like, what am I giving to the community and what am I giving to my opponent?
Yeah.
And no sooner did I say it than the very next day, I poopy pants the game. And I was like, with, the guy I play with the most, which is probably why I didn't catch myself, is because I'm so comfortable with Matt.
But I think also like everybody can have an off day.
Sure.
And recognizing that is a big part of it, right? I mean, even if you don't recognize in the moment later, you're like, oh man, I'm really sorry, or whatever. I mean, look, we're all adults and we can respond appropriately, or you can call somebody out and be like, dude, why are you being so cranky about this? Don't ruin the game.
And he was a champ about it. Thankfully, we were only playing 40 power level, so he mopped the table with me quick, which was good. And also, Brian, I started
and I think I told you, I don't feel Chaos plays at the 40 power level very well. Like the smaller point games, I think Chaos really struggles.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of things are overcosted. In my mind, overcosted. Like they're too expensive to be so small.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I actually reached out to Brian afterwards because I was still in my rage fugue. And what I realized,
who else do you reach out to?
Yeah, my
Rage Master,
my champion of rage. And actually, he talked me off the rage ledge, as it were. And
he's probably had a lot of experience with that.
Yeah, that's why you go to the pros, man. So, and a couple things he pointed out that I wanted to take away from this. Okay. One is that I've been bouncing around from army to army to army a shocking amount the last year.
Yeah.
I've been playing, this is like the 5th or 6th different army I've been playing.
Yeah.
Which means I'm just not learning the ins and outs of the rules very well.
Granted, some of those are all demons, but you're playing this faction of demons, and you may as well be playing a different army.
Right.
A different codex.
Right. They're totally no flavors mix in there.
Right.
And then sisters, orcs, chaos now.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of different little things. So I'm not learning my own rules, and that's an on me problem.
Yep.
Right. That's like, hey man, stick with one thing and get dialed in.
I've gotten pretty good at the Thousand Suns at this point because I just keep playing Thousand Suns.
You were saying today that like you're really happy with that army. You keep playing it. Yep. Well, Matt's learning and getting dialed in with this new Black Legion
for
army, sure. Not Black Legion, Death Watch. Very different. They're all black.
Not so
black
hard.
Armor
Not so
space.
far away.
What's the difference?
Come on over, Matt.
And especially coming from Gene Stealer Cult, he's now playing on easy mode rules wise,
right?
Which is fun for me to watch. I didn't do my homework. I wasn't super versed on my own. Even though I was learning, I still wasn't super versed on all the ins and outs of that little 40 power level thing. That's on me, right? And so I didn't have any reason to be upset. And the reality is just being behind as a garage gamer, being behind on what is going on in the meta of the game. There's an element of that like I had to own that, like, no, those are all things I can fix without having to go ultra competitive. Just being informed and focusing on something a little bit more. Like, and I have no desire to start chasing metas or, keeping up on everybody's codex plus Psychic Awakening plus additional, that ain't happening. But there's a certain amount of just being aware of what the heck's going on.
I think it's a valid point. Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of share my poopy pants experience about like, hey, no, like A, it happens, as you said, thanks. And then B, like, there's some very specific things I could do to improve my experience that, if I'm not happy with it, well, then focus in on one project for a little while, even just rules wise, like, hey, I'm going to play this army for the next couple months just to get dialed in rather than ping ponging all over the place. Unfortunately, that's the downside, which I hadn't really accounted for, of like, I'm so big on, I'm just following whatever creative whim I want right now. And I've been doing that for about a year. Well, the downside is then I just ping pong from army to army and I'm not getting dialed in on like, that's how this one thing works. Anyway, so I thought it was some points of my not awesome experience at the table. The game was still fun and had a good time with it and had some laughs and whatnot, but wasn't I didn't
wasn't satisfying, and
I didn't fulfill my role.
Sure.
And I wasn't satisfied with the experience I provided for my friend at the table. And that was really important to me. So I wanted to kind of call that out as PSA, part PSA of like, hey, make sure you're being aware of that. And then if you are unhappy, like, check your own stuff. Like, what are you doing? Like, why aren't you getting what you want out of it? And yeah, that was kind of
fair enough.
But we spent some time today playing one other game.
Yeah, we did. So we played Apocalypse.
Yes, indeed.
Our first time playing Apocalypse.
The new Apocalypse.
The brand new. Yeah, we played a lot of the old Apocalypse.
Oh my goodness.
Different game. Yeah. Like totally different game. And just the setup alone, and by setup, and we'll talk about this, I mean the building of lists, the selecting of cards, the preparation, the setting up the table, which I set up before you arrived.
Thank you.
And all that stuff. I mean, it's still a event. Yes, that's the word I would use. It is not you're going to just rock up to the table and throw down some Apocalypse.
Unless you would really have to have a whole lot of things dialed in a particular way. If you happen to be somebody who has multiple table war cases, and that is exactly how you store all of your stuff all of the time, that would help.
And what I would say, too, is it is as different to 40K as Adeptus Titanicus is to 40K.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but I understand what you're saying, and I think, it is its own animal.
Yeah,
600%.
And we'll talk about a little bit where those influences come from and that kind of thing in the coming segment. But this, I will say, we had a lot of fun today.
Oh yeah,
and the game, like if you were following along as we were posting pictures in the Facebook group, and the game's beautiful because first off, Jody's orcs are incredible.
Thanks.
His Bad Moon's orcs, even though he paints them yellow to model for advantage.
That's right, I do. I've been min-maxing that for 6 years, 10 years.
No, your army looks fantastic. We got to break out like all the stuff, which is super fun. For me, like this was the whole reason I did a Tzeentch Demon army and a Thousand Suns army so I could play them together. I got to play them together. It looked beautiful.
It looks awesome.
The work that Colin has done on that force, I've done a little bit. Okay, I've done one. Magnus. I've done some of the basing. Yeah, I'll take the credit.
Magnus looks at home with everybody else.
Yeah, right. And the work that Dave from Dave Paints has done on my demons, like the whole thing comes together in a very organic look, and I'm very, very satisfied with the money I've spent on that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it was a worthy spectacle of being an Apocalypse game, and it was a callback to the older editions of the game.
Yeah,
visually.
Yeah,
it
sure
had that look.
Yeah, I have not had that many models on the table in a long time.
No, nor I. And I'll actually have to post a picture of my deluxe carrying system to explain why, maybe so people can understand why did it take you guys an hour and a half to set up, because it took me an hour to get things out of their various cardboard boxes.
It's orcs.
It is orcs.
It's a lot of orcs.
And it's a reality of Apocalypse, as we'll get into. But yeah, it was a lot of laughs. It was a good time.
Yeah.
And I'll say one of my big takeaways is we played all day. And now we're recording, and I don't feel mentally
exhausted
gassed at all.
Yeah.
And
we learned it. Like,
right.
Some of it we had to, but I couldn't play 2 games of 40K, or I couldn't play the old Apocalypse.
No.
At the end of every time where we would play the old Apocalypse, I'm just exhausted.
Yeah,
exhausted.
Yeah, not at all there.
Mentally, very, very taxed. As you said, well, you got to do math, right?
Well, yeah,
but we'll get into the details. But it is fun.
Yeah.
I don't think I would play it regularly. Like, for me, it's an event type of game.
Right.
And we'll get into more of that in a little bit. So we'll be right back after this, and we'll get into the main topic.
Hey, guys. I'm Caleb.
And this is Kat.
And we are CK Studios. We want to invite you and your friends to come paint with us at one of our exciting and fun-filled airbrush and hobby weekenders. Our weekend workshops are 2 days of intense hands-on training, working directly with and learning from some of the top gaming artists in the industry.
Whether you're brand new to miniature painting or an experienced veteran that wants to up your game, CK Studios has the workshop for you. Our workshops cover everything from learning the basics and building confidence in airbrushing, all the way up to creating that centerpiece model for your army or display case.
For more class info and our upcoming schedule, you can find us on Facebook at CK Studios Come Paint With Us, or register directly at ckstudios.bigcartel.com.
If you can't find a class near you, that's okay. Just contact us and we'll bring a workshop to you.
And welcome back. Now we're going to move on to our main topic, which is Apocalypse, and Apocalypse in particular in 8th edition. But I wanted to, you can't really talk about where it is now without talking about where it came from.
Yeah.
And first off, what is Apocalypse? Like,
So-
how would you summarize it?
Massive battles.
Okay.
It is 40K as close to the art as you're going to get.
Yeah.
Because when you see art, and I used to have this gripe a lot with Warhammer Fantasy Battle, when you see pictures in the old world of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, it's these massive just walls, sheets of bodies.
Yeah.
And when you see art most of the time for 40K, if it's a battle scene, there are just bodies upon bodies, and especially the older art from the 90s through the millennium was just bodies on top of bodies. I think they've gotten a lot better now where they zoom in a little bit more. So squad level combat feels more like what you're doing. But those grand scale battles, it gets you that feel, that apocalyptic battle. The
Sieges of cities and, just massive armies clashing, super heavies. Like this is where super heavies in my mind really belong.
Yeah, they feel at home here. Like, today my Stompa was running around and it never felt weird at all.
No.
Like he felt just like part of the game.
Yep.
I'd love to, not tomorrow, but in some point in the future, see what the Reaver does.
Sure. Yeah.
And how that operates. And
so, really the whole point of Apocalypse was so that people could play with all their models.
Yep.
Right. You have all these models, you can bring them out on the table, play. This game does and does not meet that goal. Like it's a little bit different. Yeah. The older versions wouldn't focus quite as much on having specific builds to the list. Like you just kind of threw everything in a huge list. You maybe had formations that you could get benefits from building towards.
in one of the later versions, yeah.
Yeah, but you could also mix Eldar and Marines, and it was always goofy.
You know what's funny is like Apocalypse was the original open play.
Yeah. Yeah, this is very true.
Yeah, it was the just bring all your stuff, just set it all up. We're just going to roll dice and kill each other. And I think that also led for a while to a lot of really lousy looking Apocalypse games where literally it was the guy that's like, I have 40,000 points or something. You're like, cool. And then they show up and it's all gray plastic. And you're like, oh, well, that's underwhelming.
Yeah, well, for us, it's completely underwhelming.
Yeah,
but also,
a fun way
it's gray plastic of Tau, Necrons, Eldar, and you're like, what are you doing?
Playing with all our toys.
Yeah. We have definitely always played Apocalypse games that are thematic, right? That are themed around a story, a telling, a type of battle that feels correct within the 40K universe. So anyway, the rules for Apocalypse, the first edition Apocalypse rules were for 4th edition 40K. And actually, this was very close to when I got into the game that these came out. And the greatest thing about that at the time was they had released box sets that you would buy that had multiple vehicles in them.
Right.
Like, hey, here's 3 Vindicators. And then if you had 3 Vindicators and they all shot at the same thing, it had extra abilities and, whatnot. But you could buy these big Apocalypse sets and there was savings there, actually.
Yeah, there was.
Significant savings.
And you had a serving saucer-sized blast template that you could lay over that was like...
It was like the size of a record.
Yeah, it was massive.
It was huge.
That was great. That was...
Those things I really enjoyed, to be honest with you.
What was the spectacle? Like, I've got a 45 that's that's of death.
Look at this flamer template that's 18 inches long or whatever it is. It's ridiculous.
That scale is almost comedic. In a funny way, you were saying we've always played thematically, and my old group G3 that it's been mentioned a number of times on the show, that Apocalypse is kind of where we really found, I'd say, our full identity and stride. Like we'd had these armies and we'd built these narratives into all of our armies, and those were still just pickup games. But then this notion of Apocalypse came out and it was like, here's a way to play with all of your toys. But in a weird way, the thematic gaming became almost a necessity for us.
Right.
So it wasn't just like bring all your stuff. When we tried it and went, that's not fun.
Right.
And then realized like we need some structure. So the story became the structure. But yeah, I'd forgotten about those boxes. They were amazing. That was a revelation at the time.
Yep. So that was around October 2007, 4th edition 40K. And then in 2008, they added this thing called Apocalypse Reloaded, which was just a softbound book. Now the great thing about that first edition Apocalypse book too is it's larger sized book. just in height and width. And it had great visuals in it. Like just great photos of massive games being played and ideas for games and that kind of. It is still a great book today because it still has valuable ideas and images that are evoking, evocative is the word I'm looking for in that book. So it's a great book if you can get your hands on it. Apocalypse Reloaded was really just more data sheets for different formations and that kind of thing added to Apocalypse.
Yeah, almost problematically so.
Yeah.
That was when things started getting some cracks in the machine, as it were, that like it started becoming take this, get free ones of these. And it started falling apart a little bit.
Yeah. So then you had, in 5th edition, they released a 2nd edition of Apocalypse that came out, and that was around July of 2013. I should also mention that during both of these, there were Forge World books that also had Apocalypse units in them. So you had a book of just all the units you could use and some formations for those units that were primarily Forge World based models. And they revised those for the next edition as well.
Right.
And this edition of Apocalypse was actually a significant improvement over the previous one. It provided certain things that helped speed the game up. These books gave a lot of advice for how to run these events because really Apocalypse is an event, how to speed them up, how to keep people on track. This Adon used a lot during his time at in-game when he ran these big Apocalypse games where people had time limits, make sure you're aware of what you're doing. This is how we're going to deploy. Like you were on a mission to complete the game.
Right. The game within the game.
But to our point, you got exhausted by the end of it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Anthony was exceptional at this within our group of, we would show up the night before to set the table for the game and deploy troops.
Yeah.
We would plan time. You had so much time per turn, per
Yep,
player's turn.
we did the same thing.
There were a lot of little steps, and it was neat because I think it was one of those times where it felt like the things that the community had figured out showed up in the rules.
Right.
And at this time, I mean, not quite 10 years ago, but not that far away, 7-8 years ago.
Yeah.
That wasn't a common thing for GW, was to feel like
Not at all.
This version of the game is what the community had figured out. It added a lot of structure that was needed. But still felt very open. You could still do what you wanted, but it gave some really good guidelines.
And again, I would say that book is also pretty valuable. Like there's a lot of great information in that book too. It still has some value for ideas, for scenarios, that kind of thing. Then we move into the 3rd edition of Apocalypse, which is what we're at now. 2019 was released, and we take a whole different approach, which is very clever for them to do.
Yeah. They go back.
Yeah.
Went backwards.
Yeah. And so it takes some of its inspiration from
Epic Space Marine. So this is probably the first game I really, within the 40K universe, the first game that I really became passionate about. And this is early 90s, late 80s. Mm-hmm. And the token system of placing order counters, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit of at the core of the game, is how this epic scale game worked. Was you had these markers and you put them out, and it creates an interesting fog of war dynamic. Really a unique and fantastic game, and man, does this new edition borrow heavily from it.
I think wisely so.
Yes.
Yeah. But as we discovered today, there was a lot of discussion about, this is how it plays. This is prior to us actually playing. This is how it plays, and this, that, and the other thing. It's faster as Apocalypse, and it is, but it's still an event. I'm not even, like, you can't say, Jeff has been pinging us and saying, should I play regular 40K games like this? And while you could, I feel like it doesn't belong there. It's very, very, there's a lot of things that are very genericized, a lot of things that probably they all work very differently, but like things that you would expect to be very, very powerful on the field in 40K, not as powerful in this,
Characters.
Yeah, characters.
I mean, that's the big glaring thing is, your Demon Prince runs out there and he attacks, and he's got 2 attacks.
Yep. Woohoo.
And he might do a blast template, which may or may not actually damage a unit later on, and that's it. And he's a Psyker, which may or may not manifest to power the entire game.
Yeah.
You know,
For sure.
It's the characters are wildly different. It is not, they are not they aren't dominating the battlefield like they do in 40K by any stretch.
So, and by mention, I mean, every unit has a new data card. This is truly, let's move into this, because this is really how Apocalypse fits into the three ways you play 40K. You have Kill Team, and this is not us making us up. This is Games Workshop's objective. You have Kill Team, which is small unit actions to ease people into the game. You have 40K, which is the typical way the game is played, and it stretches up to about 3,000 points where it begins to break down a bit. And then you have Apocalypse for these much larger games that you want to play. In Kill Team, during playtesting, one of the things that they were saying was it is important to us, and I know this because I was playtesting, it was important for them to keep the same stat line as 40K.
Right.
And the reason for that was because they wanted you to get used to that so that when you moved into 40K, it was not a huge leap. In Apocalypse, you have new data sheets for every unit.
Yep.
Those data sheets are very different than a 40K data sheet in many, many ways. And units that you know how to use in 40K are very different in Apocalypse and how they manifest on the table.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say it's a completely different game.
Yeah.
It's in the 40K universe, but it is effectively Epic at 28 millimeter scale.
It really is that version of Epic, and it actually borrows some from Epic Warhammer 40,000, which was a later version of Epic, and it's kind of somewhere in between the two, which actually lands in a really nice spot. You know, and the 40K, there's just enough crossover where you're not going to feel totally out of water.
Correct.
But if you're not paying attention, there will be little surprises and twists and turns. You know, I mean,
we couldn't make assumptions.
No.
Right? As we played each game, let me read. Karo's Fate Weaver, I had him on the table, and like half of them, like, I'm playing this guy wrong.
Right.
Because he does this and this, which is not something I've ever heard of before.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and there's universal special rules in play. And there's
so
not
Adon
very
should
many
love
of them. Adon, you love this version. But
there's only like 12 of them or something like
right.
that.
And there's a lot of streamlining. And the streamlining, I think, is really smart here and is something I didn't fully appreciate in it as a rule set until we sat down and played today. And I went, oh, now I see why it has to be streamlined. Because if you're wanting to play Apocalypse games, what is it you're wanting to do?
So you want to play massive games. You want to finish your game.
Ideally.
And I mean, it really falls like in anything beyond 300 power level. So that's where this is going to start. Yeah, that's where you're going to start feeling like now I need to play something different. Right. Otherwise, you're going to spend forever.
Right.
And we'll talk about why that is in a minute. But I mean, you want to play battles that are that large. You want a thing where Lords of War are not out of context.
Right.
Right? Like somebody bringing a whole bunch of knights to an Apocalypse game. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
It's totally fine. You know, you're not going to feel like, well, how am I going to deal with this? Oh no. Right. You got a bunch of stuff out there to deal with that too.
Yeah.
You know, it's not you're not limited.
Right.
I am not a huge fan of Lords of War in 40K, primarily because I know where they came from, and I think it's jammed in there, and I don't think it needed to be. In large games, like, again, I have to go back to Horus Heresy. Like, I liked that it was like, hey, X percentage can only, a Lord of War can only be X percentage of your points. And that really limited how many you were throwing out there.
Sure. So. And I mean, the reality is this: if you're playing with Lords of War, for example, my Stampa, I wouldn't ever play that in a 40K game without talking to my opponent first. Like, hey, I'd really like to play this. Is that cool? I mean, the same could almost be said of Knights. Like showing up at a pickup game with like, hey, I have my Knights army and you didn't tell me. I'm like, that. Wow,
it's becoming a little less of an issue now than it used to be, I think, because a lot of units and a lot of armies out there know how to deal with that stuff. And there's drawbacks to a full knight army, right? Like, I'm not going to be able to control objective markers. It's an objective marker game. I'm screwed.
But to the point of Lords of War, that you're still in a regular 40K game, even a kind of big 40K game, you kind of got to go like, hey, heads up. You don't need to do that in Apocalypse.
No,
you kind of assume that they're going to be out there. Like, oh, no, this is how. And this system of streamlining really makes them at home.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, they're still strong.
Yeah.
But they're not, they're not invincible.
Yeah, well, we found that out late in the game that like mine shelled your Land Raider. I was like, it's freaking dead. And then you were like, I made my saves. And I was like, Land
Saved
Raiders
all
are
of it.
durable.
Yep.
Huh.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be durable.
Not a scratch on it.
I disagree.
And you want to play with tons of models on the table. You want a visually cool looking thing. I mean, this is, when you see the pictures of what we just did, it looks great.
Yeah.
It looks amazing.
Yeah,
The orcs look like orcs are supposed to look.
Right,
You even
well,
said as you were playing.
Yeah, I had, was it 120 boys on foot in the middle of the table. And I was like, that's what it's supposed to look like a sheet of boys. And they were running over a crater. You could barely see the crater, but you could see the boys were undulating over the field.
I set up and then you set up, and I was like, oh, that's a lot of orcs.
It is a lot of orcs.
And it is a lot of orcs. Yeah. So, okay. Jody, we say, hey, we want to play a game of Apocalypse. What do we need to do in advance of playing?
A lot still.
Yeah. A whole lot.
Yeah, this isn't something, and I think
You're not going to throw a list together quickly. I'll tell you that right now.
not as quickly as I thought I would,
No.
which is funny because back in the day, even with points versus power level now, back in the day, I felt like it was kind of just a matter of like, just get all your stuff out and like real quick tally up the points because just
And then pull a few out or put a few more in.
right. And it's a guy here. This took some time to like, because at the core of it, and we're going to get into it, is detachments are such an important part to this game.
Yeah.
But the way the detachments are structured is just slightly different than the way they are in 40K.
Yeah.
And I found myself bumping into that. I'm like, I'll just take all these guys and these guys and these guys. I'm like, I can't actually put all them together. They won't all fit.
Yeah.
I have to think about this differently. So yeah, in advance to play, well, first off, your first note here is you need room.
Lots of
room. And that is true. Well, the basic table is, what are we on, 6x8?
This one we played 6x8. They recommend different size tables based on the number of points you're playing. We were probably, I think this table was actually a little large for what they recommended, but I felt like we were
Stretching it.
we were pushed.
Yeah.
And I did not flood the table with terrain like I would in a 40K game because I love a lot of terrain. Even as I looked at it, I was like, oh, maybe I'm a little sparse on terrain. And then as we started playing, the models take over the table as opposed to the terrain.
Oh, I felt bottlenecked.
Yeah. Oh, you were. And we both were at certain points. And there was, I mean, not an insignificant amount of terrain on the table, but it was light by what we typically play.
All the small, and that's one of those old Apocalypse things that proves true now. The small scatter terrain, like, oh, here's a cluster of 3 barrels. If you're playing Apocalypse, get that stuff off the table. Have
just get it out of the
buildings and like big clusters of things. Otherwise, don't bother because it's just going to get in the way.
And then we also talked about sideboards for.
Oh my gosh, so crucial. Like I cannot tell you. I mean, literally, I told you, I don't know that I could comfortably set up my army at my, our condo that we live in.
It would be tight.
It would be hard to like anywhere in the house set it up because as I'm taking models out, I have boxes that have to go somewhere. And, luckily the Astronomicon's such a comfortable space to be in. It's such a big area.
Yeah.
But
we each had our own fold out table from like Home Depot or wherever I bought those. So it's a 2.5 by 6 foot table. So we each had one that we could put our whole army on and then put it onto the table. And then as we pull models off, put it onto that table.
right. And have tokens and books and cards.
And this is, what did we say? 8 foot by 6 foot. Yeah. So it's a good size.
Yeah, and needed it. So
Yep.
yeah, first and foremost, you got to have some space and some time.
Yeah.
Because it, getting, like we said, getting out the models and this and that. Man, the detachment thing surprised me.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about detachments. This goes into the list building. So when you start to prepare your list, and this is one of the key things for players in Apocalypse that are going to do well in Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Because so for example, in 40K, you have a battalion detachment. You have a battalion detachment here too. The problem is every detachment has a warlord in it.
Yes.
And you need to keep all your units. You want to keep all your units. You don't have to. You want to keep all your units within 12 inches of that warlord because if they fall outside of that 12 inches, that warlord, and they take any wounds, they become very, very susceptible to just being taken right off the table.
Right.
So as you build a detachment, whether it's a battalion detachment or what, you need to take into account, one, what's the speed of my warlord? What's the speed of everything else around it? Right. How am I going to use these things in a way that support each other and not have somebody outdistance a unit or feel constrained by moving distance for that unit? So, I found myself wanting to put like fast units in the same kinds of detachments so that they could move together and stay together and be able to maneuver and stay in that command bubble. It brought me back to playing Tyranids and having them within synapse a lot. Now, fortunately, you have a little flexibility in some of those things. Like I had an all-vehicle detachment at one point. One of the vehicles is the warlord, though he's not. He's a commander.
Right. Well, that's an important difference is in a detachment, if there's no HQ required by the detachment, you don't have to have a character. Something else can be the command.
It's the thing with the highest leadership.
Right. And if there's a tie, you just pick one. It's the commander for that detachment. But then you're not generating
asset cards,
your tactical asset
which are
cards.
important later, and we'll talk about those. So as you build your list, and as I was building my list, it's not as freeform as Apocalypse used to be.
No.
Right? Like you are very much like, okay, I've got these units. I'm going to put these units together, but now I've got these units, and I'm going to put these together in another detachment, and I'm going to put these together in another detachment. In the end, I think I had 6 or 7 detachments on the table.
Which you also want because of the way activation works in the game. So you want lots of detachments. And I'll be honest, and I knew this conceptually, I love this about this style of Apocalypse.
The back and forth.
I love the way you build your army.
Oh, yeah.
So for example, I took an Outrider detachment. Mm-hmm. It had 2 separate units of Devcoptas and a unit of Warbikes. And the reason...
all things that could keep up with each other.
They're all move 14.
Yeah.
And then a Def Kill a Trike to lead the entire group.
Right.
Because everything moves the same speed. And I needed an HQ that would generate the
be able to keep
assets
up and
keep up. And I loved thinking about, well, what is an Outrider detachment thematically speaking or narratively?
Right.
It's supposed to be that forward reaching force.
Right.
And that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so you had to build to that story. And I don't have any problem with some rules here instead pushing you towards what's optimum play and like how to smash face. Instead, it's build it so it does the story thing.
And that works in this game.
It
that
really
absolutely
feels
works
that
in
way.
this game. I mean, if you don't stick to that, you're going to have a detachment that's not very effective.
Right.
Is what's going to wind up happening. So yeah, I found building the list took a lot longer than I had anticipated. And people who are good at building those lists that understand like these units are going to go together, not just based on speed, but on how they support each other and those kind of things are going to do well at Apocalypse. There is a list building game within there that you need to learn how to do.
And it's a different game than list building for 40K.
Oh, very different.
Because you're thinking, I guess I dare say you're thinking on a different, I was going to say strategic, but it's not really, but a different tactical level than you are in 40K. In 40K, it's, which weapon and which aura and which are going to overlap. And there's a little bit of this and this, but exactly as you said, it's how are these detachments interacting with each other? Yep. What is the job? And I was it wasn't a fluke that when I deployed, I went, no, that Outrider detachment with the Coptas, they're going on a flank.
Right.
And they're going to push up a flank because they'll be able to turn if I get lucky.
Yeah.
They'll turn it because tactically, realistically, and I mean actual real world warfare, that's how you set up a force. You don't set them up in the middle.
How do they stay out of each other's way?
Which got me late in the game.
Got me too.
Yeah, the 120 boys jammed up the middle, and my Death Dreads were just standing in the middle going like, hey, cool.
We can't move.
We're stuck.
So I found that is a key part of the game that I hadn't really realized how important it was as I was like, hey, let's play Apocalypse. We'll just put all these things out on the table. Oh, wait, hold on. There's a lot of structure to it. And you need to pay very, very close attention to that structure.
And those data cards to jump in there are actually different points values. Their power levels are different power levels slightly than what's in the codex.
Oh, yeah.
It's their own unique level. So it really is important.
Now, all the Apocalypse data sheets are free online. So you can get them and download them and print them out or use them on a digital format free online. They're all PDF format, which is great. but you have to be aware they are a different.
Yeah.
It's a different game.
Yeah. And not only the rules different, but again, those points and how you buy things. And there are some really important little differences there.
Yeah. The cards too. So you just alluded to the asset cards. I didn't realize how important these were to know too. So in every Apocalypse game, every Apocalypse version up till now, you've had Apocalypse cards. And they offer things like, I'm going to outflank you, here, or I'm going to orbital strike, or I'm going to do this. And you have some that seem familiar like that. But the cards are so key to how you play now. It is not just my unit does this and I use this card. It's I need this card to make this happen.
Right.
Especially for me, where you were talking about psychic stuff.
Yeah.
Because, hey, you got a Lord of Change? Great. Well, where's my psychic power? I hope you drew a card.
Right.
It has a psychic power. And he's a psyker, so you could use it from any psyker if it is of that, faction. But you need that card. And so the way you go about doing this is you build a deck of 30 cards from your options. That's from your, if you have multiple forces on the table, like myself, I had demons and Thousand Suns. I had Thousand Suns cards, demon cards, and then generic Apocalypse cards that totaled 30 cards in my deck.
Right.
And that was it.
And I was blown away. I had
Which I liked, by the way. I liked the fact that you built the deck to your army.
Right. And I think that's great. And I think it adds a lot of flavor and uniqueness. We saw in that last turn of our game, actually, that your Thousand Suns, rather than being like psychic hammers, their durability is actually
really kind of
their shtick. Like it's that like they just kind of shrug off damage that you'd think
would have took them out.
Yeah. You're like, oh, I mean, we had that one squad of Rubric Marines. I'm like, oh, they're dead. I'm good. And then like, they weren't even hurt.
No.
They were aces.
I think they lost the morale test and took a wound because of that.
Oh.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is the person who knows how to, one, build their lists appropriately here. And I mean, that sounds like going without saying when I say it, but it is such a big part of this. Like how you build your detachments is so important. And then two, understands what cards they're going to use for these detachments. It's not something I feel like you just rock up and flip out. Hey, I'm going to do this and now I'm good to go.
Right.
You want to give a lot of thought to not so much the probability of a certain thing coming up in your deck of 30 cards, because we were drawing quite a few cards each round.
You'll see your deck.
Yeah. You'll go through the deck pretty much. I didn't quite finish it, but by the end of round 3, but I was about to.
Right. But we finished kind of early. Yeah. I mean, our game kind of went because of how
I lost.
Played out.
You had it. You had it heavily in hand by that point. But
there's more cards than I expected. That was the thing that shocked me.
Yeah.
It was like the sheer that big box of cards. I was like, oh, whatever. I guess I'll just grab the generics. And then like I started going into it. I was like, holy cow. And then I realized how, exactly as you're saying, how those become the flavor for your faction.
Very much so.
You'll have your rules and stats, but for the unit cards, you're really just getting stats.
Yep.
For the tactical assets,
and the cards all tell you like what phase of the game you can use them in, but it's very, very important to winning the game. It's incredibly important to getting the most out of your army.
The difference, I'd say, in terms of, because when you're building your army, not only are you building these attachments, but as we're saying, you're building this deck to supplement your army. When you're building an army for a game of 40K, at least when I do, I'm thinking in terms of how are the rules overlapping here, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to play a regular game of 40K. This unit has these rules, and this unit has these rules, and it gives this bonus. Okay, cool. Those will all work well. Here I'm thinking, how do these large systems interrelate? I'm not thinking individual rules. I'm thinking thematically, what's this unit or this detachment going to do?
Right.
Okay, I built one of my other detachments was a spearhead with it was a dread mob.
Right.
But it wasn't just a dread mob. It had Gorkanauts and Morkanauts and cans.
It was so cool looking.
It was so cool. That was so fun to field it. But I knew, okay, this is going to do this thing. It's going to be, and I just trusted in the narrative that like the rules are going to match the narrative. They're going to be durable.
Yeah.
And they were.
Yep.
And they're going to stomp forward and then like kind of reveling in that. But yeah, it was thinking in terms of system rather than in terms of rules. Like, what are my war systems? If that makes sense. It's kind of a strange way to explain it, but it's a totally different mindset. It was alarmingly so. But
And then the other thing that we've kind of alluded to the whole time is you need time. You need time to set this up and prepare. The more prepared, and they've always said this about Apocalypse, the more prepared you are at the beginning of the game, the better the game's going to go. And without a doubt, more so than 40K, again, these are events. You need to set aside, yes, it plays a lot faster than it used to play,
so much
like
faster.
tremendously faster. But just the setup alone, you can expect to add a significant amount of time to how you play through the game. But playing through the game will go faster than it ever did before.
Absolutely. And this setup that we're talking about too, this can all be done away from the table.
Yep.
Building your deck should be done. Neither of us were really there today.
Nope.
But the deck should have been built beforehand. Your battalions should be sorted out and what you want to do.
Yep. If you had all that, like you could get rocking a lot quicker.
Right. Especially if you had movement trays.
Oh yeah. Yeah. All joking aside, like movement trays would be handy. Not required.
No.
But it will speed you up.
Yeah. I was sad that I did not have them.
And if you have a 3D printer, there are plenty of movement trays out there on Thingiverse to download and print.
One other note you have here before we move on. You want to be able to organize your tokens. You're going to want a token. This game
uses a lot of tokens.
Yeah, it is, which is interesting to me because 40K, this is one of the things I adore that GW has done as a rules design model with regular traditional 40K, is there is so little counter stuff
for
on
most
the table.
armies. Yeah.
It is really, I mean, a couple dice here and there to track some damage, but otherwise there shouldn't be anything on the table. I remember days when there was stuff all over the table that had nothing to do with models or dice interacting. I love that. There are arguably some problematic things going on with tokens.
There's so many models on the table. Sometimes that you got to make sure you move your tokens with your units. There's always multiple tokens near a unit.
Right. And I think
what
would
be
sense.
Cool is even like a little, as you have movement trays, like a little slot next to movement trays to slide the tokens in would be very handy.
That would be handy.
Yeah.
Yeah, or just a little cup. Like
Something.
I'm thinking of when they sell dice, they have those new little plastic boxes.
Yeah.
Having one of those, a smaller something.
Yeah, I don't know, but there were a lot of tokens on the table. No, and it worked.
Yeah.
But there's so many that sometimes you're missing things here and there.
Yeah, that you get. We did that. We got midway into a turn, and we're like, "There's a blast token there that
Sitting
should have
here
been
that
gone a while
I should have
ago."
rolled that, and it turned out it removed a vehicle.
Oh shoot, that did.
Yeah,
that's right.
So fortunately, it had no impact at that point. But yeah,
as a just a heads up. So if you get into this and you're wanting to go this route, in the United States, all the dollar stores you can go to them. In any dollar store, go into the kitchen area, and they have little spice jars or spice dishes. They're, I don't know, about 2-3 inches wide. It's a little shallow bowl. You get 3 of them, I think, literally for $1. Buy 2 sleeves of those. In a game like this, and you can set them on the side. And the nice thing is you can sort your tokens one into each little dish.
Yeah.
From board gaming, these are, anybody who's an avid board gamer has done this a long time ago. And it's just really nice to not have to be plucking things. And at a quick glance, this pile has these in it. This pile has these.
Yeah, because you have small blast tokens, large blast tokens, wound tokens,
commander tokens, out of command tokens,
order tokens. I think that's about it.
Yeah.
But it's a lot, and you're using all of them. Like you use a lot of these,
right?
So, and I will say the basic Apocalypse set that comes with all the tokens, it comes with plenty.
Yeah, you have it's enough for both people.
Way more than I needed for my whole army, and we had 2 of those boxes. You used yours.
You don't need it.
No,
and I think that. Well, I'll hold on to that thought until later. But yeah, you want some way to organize your tokens. You have a plano box. I think that's a great one. A variety of different bags to sort. This is one of those, like, I am not a compulsive sort my stuff, decant my models person, but this is one spot where I'm like, no, you're going to want to sort this. This is, there's enough going on that you don't want to be spending 20 minutes sorting through your tokens.
No. So, all right, well, let's do this. We're going to take a break. Then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about how the actual game plays out a bit and what our experience was there and what we thought about it.
Yeah.
So we'll be right back.
If you're a true follower of chaos, enjoy killing Tau scum, fry devilfish for breakfast, drink the blood of fire warriors, collect the bones of Kroot fodder, desecrate the cockpits of mantas with demonic sigils, sing songs of chaotic praise and joy, when berserkers chain axe overwatching broadsides, helldrake baleflame shield drones into flying discs of spinning fire, and just all around bask in the path to glory, then the Shrine of Chaos podcast is a must-listen for you. I'm Mini Wargamer Dave from MiniWargaming.com, and I invite you to be a champion of chaos. Listen to the Shrine of Chaos podcast wherever podcasts are downloadable. Thank you, independent characters, for allowing this message from the Eye of Terror.
All right, we're back, and we are continuing our coverage of Apocalypse. I want to talk about like the current state of the Apocalypse rule set, which obviously it's new and improved. We've discussed that it's faster, it's streamlined.
Oh my gosh, so much so.
I feel like if you think 8th edition 40K is too, what's the term? You got rid of all the like granular detail.
It's too streamlined.
Yeah, abstract.
Oh, okay.
It's abstract, right?
Yes.
Like your vehicle fires from anywhere because it's considered to have been moving and yada yada. This is even more abstract.
Oh my gosh, to the extreme.
So if you do not care for abstract in your miniature gaming rules, you're going to have an issue with this game.
I'll tell you what, though, this was the first thing that jumped out to me. I mean, we couldn't have been playing for more than half an hour before I went like, oh my God, I don't miss that. The sitting and watching somebody move one squad of Marines and then go, oh wait, I meant this squad. Oh wait, it's the shooting phase. What does this squad have?
Yeah.
And be looking on their list like a traditional 40K game when you're looking across the table at going, there's 20 squads of Marines over there. Why are you looking up rules for a squad?
Right.
And when you, in the older editions of Apocalypse, when you got good at it and you knew how to follow the structure and that those kind of things really just frankly didn't matter, watching somebody be across the table from you do that
Painful.
It was hard. I think I can legitimately say for my game group, it was hard for us to not call people on it pretty aggressively of like, you need to stop. That's a tactical squad.
Move your stuff.
Move them.
Yep.
Don't, if you forget it's something, you forgot it. Stop.
Well, the thing was because the other opponent is not doing that. Just they're not in their stuff, you know.
Right. And
it all comes
and you're
out in the
not
wash.
playing.
Yeah.
You're not playing. Like that's hours of sitting and watching somebody else move and agonize and stare at a spreadsheet.
And I think that was probably the biggest drawback to Apocalypse was you spent a lot of time waiting.
Yeah.
Not quite as much now.
Not at all.
And so the other thing we should mention is they introduced D12s into the game.
Hallelujah.
You still use D6s,
Yep.
but you also use D12s for some very specific things.
That is my favorite polyhedral die.
Is it?
It is.
I've never been a fan of the D12.
To me, and see, that's weird to me because you're old schooler D&D-er than
I've always
I
been a
am.
fan of the D10, and then I skip the D12, and I go to D20.
See, because I remember way back in the day, drawing a D20 is actually really hard to sit down and pencil draw to get it to line up just right. But a D20 or a D12 is not too difficult.
Not quite as hard.
So a lot of like magazines and stuff, whenever you saw like role-playing game, it would have a picture of a D12.
Right.
And so in my mind, that was that cool thing that I wanted to do. And I just like the way the variance on percentages work on a D12, but that's getting pretty nerdy. And
I just remember that
like
it
D12s.
was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It was the damage longswords did against large creatures. So
There you go.
that's why I always had one. All right, enough of that. They do introduce D12s into the system, which makes it handy. You roll initiative with a D12. Person who rolls the highest goes first, essentially. There's a few other nuances there. Who's the attacker? Who's the defender? Kind of thing. But, but effectively, that's it.
Right. Ties go to the alternate.
Yep.
Which is nice. I like that. That's a mechanic I kind of want them to adopt universally. I want that to become a GW
Pretty
default.
easy. Yeah.
But,
yeah. Then you enter what's called the order phase.
It's
And
important.
This is probably one of the most important. Look, they're all important phases of this game. In the order phase, there's actually 4 steps. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to mark units that are out of command, meaning out of that 12-inch bubble we talked about before, because those units are susceptible to kind of just getting wiped out at that point.
Right. And this is a thematic point that can't be kind of overstated. Characters specifically who are generating these command asset cards and commanding detachments, their role is there to provide command structure. It is this imitation of, you know, the reality of war, that there is a command structure in play. There are people on the ground issuing these orders. And I love this rule that if guys start spreading out too far, it's going to create a problem. And one of the things I like about this from a mechanical standpoint of if you're organizing a game with multiple players on each side of the table is it prevents what is another giant time sink from the old versions, where like, oh, I have this army that's all these different speedy units, and then tactically it makes sense to have those units all over your battle line.
Right.
And so that one player is running from
back and forth
back
across
and forth,
the line.
Up and
That's
down.
a good point. I didn't even think about
20-foot line.
that. Yeah.
No. Your detachments all together. Keep your detachment together. It's going to have problems if you spread it out.
You're welcome to spread it out. It's not going to last long if you do.
If you can't get them back together quick, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. So the next thing would be you would set up reinforcements if you have your reserves come in.
Yep.
And they can come in different ways. Usually they're coming in off your back line unless they're deep striking in. But again, you have detachments.
Yep.
You have detachments. And if your commander's not with your deep striking unit, like, see, this is where like Deathwing would be great, right? Because you have a bunch of Terminators. They have a commander with them. They all deep strike in. Again, you have to be 9 inches away from the opponent, yada, yada. But they have suddenly a commander with them, their detachment. I had a squad of Terminators in reserve just to see how the effect worked, and never really got a lot of use out of them because my the detachment that was dealing with that was kind of in the back line. So while I could have thrown the Terminators deep into your territory and had them, they would have died the next round.
Right, because they wouldn't have had command support.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you generate command assets. And this is where you're drawing cards from your deck. And you draw effectively one card
For your army.
Just you get one card. Then you draw one card for each commander you have in detachments.
Each warlord.
Or excuse me, each warlord.
So a warlord is a character that is a commander.
Correct.
And a commander is just the unit that's in charge of
And the reason there's a distinction there is, again, we talked about my spearhead detachment, which was 2 predators and a land raider. I have no character in there. I still have a commander, which I assign to my land raider in this case, and I have to keep the predators kind of within 12 inches of him, otherwise they become out of command. But he doesn't generate an asset. Only a character who's the commander generates. So we were generating
5,
6,
well, I was
7
about 5 or
cards.
6, and I think you were.
I was
8,
generating
7
more
or
than
8.
that. Yeah, 7 or 8 cards. Plus, I had like a special ability, which I could roll in on a 4+. I would get another card, and I had a couple other abilities that allowed me to generate even more cards. The reality, though, is you can only have 10 cards at the end of any phase.
Right.
If you get to the end of the phase and you still have over 10 cards, you have to discard till you're down to 10. So usually that would be at this point.
Right. And I think one of the as you mentioned earlier, one of the tricks of understanding this game is this is a game where you want to be cycling through that deck.
Yep.
You want to be seeing as much of it as you can, as fast as you can, so that you have the right cards that you can be using
At the right time.
at the right times, and that you're frankly using your cards, because every card is this additional ability. I had a psychic power I never got to use that would have allowed 3 units to fight again as a free
I
action.
kept waiting for you to use this because I could use the
Cancel
the whatever it is,
and then roll a 1 like I did.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, we discovered very quickly, like in the first round, we're like, oh, you should be burning through these cards pretty quick.
Yeah, you want them played.
And you're just playing them, pretty much as fast as you can. You may hold on to 1 or 2 for a key kind of important thing. Some of the cards were defensive, like
Right. Deny the Witch, you're canceling a psychic power.
or allowing me to roll different dice for saving throws when it's important, right? I kind of want to hold on to those till it was really key. But in general, you are generating a lot of these cards and you're spinning them. There were points where I had like 12 cards in my hand and I had to ditch a couple.
One thing we didn't touch on yet that these cards also do is war at this scale. There are things that are going to happen on that battlefield at this scale that are kind of tropes within 40K that you don't see in a traditional 40K game, like an orbital bombardment,
Right?
Or you had a silver tower, shoot a magical beam
from
across
the silver tower.
Yeah, that's an old epic unit. Is these floating Zinchian towers that you would never see them in 40K? They'd be these massive things. But here it's very common. I opened up with an orbital bombardment and giant pulsar rockets raining down from the sky. It was super. I was like, that's rad. That's great. So it's another thing these cards do beyond just that they're one off, like, oh, you got to reroll, you got to this, but they're these large scale things.
And some cards also have multiple things. Like they will say, oh, you can do this, or you can do this other thing instead.
Right.
So you have quite a bit of flexibility, but understanding what cards you put in your deck is super important.
And if you are somebody who really thinks through things, takes your time, or is susceptible to analysis paralysis,
study these in advance.
Please. Like 20 minutes. I think I really enjoyed that when you and I played at the beginning of the turn. I was like, all right, let's drop our cards. And it was quiet for a minute or two. And it was like, you good? Yep. Okay. And move on. They're not super complicated.
What I would
didn't find
do,
any of them fiddly.
What I would
all.
do is organize my cards into, these are cards I'm going to use in the action phase. Like these are basically attack bonuses. Mm-hmm. These are cards I'm going to use in the phase where I'm rolling, I'm rolling for my damage saves. And then these are maybe some other cards like psychic. Defenses or something. And then I would just separate them into those kind of categories. So I knew, okay, wait, I'm in the action phase. Let me pick up my stack of action cards. And then I'd go through those and go, do I want to use any of these?
Right.
That's what I would basically do.
Yeah.
To speed it along. But if you studied them in advance, like nights before, and you were familiar with, this is how my army is going to work, it would be much smoother.
Right. Yeah. You could really get lost in the weeds of what if and wherefores and permutations of the.
I also liked reading the flavor text on the card as I would use it.
Yeah.
Like I would read it out loud and be like, oh, this beam comes down from the Silver Tower and strikes the,
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, it's cool.
It is cool. Yeah,
I thought it added a lot, actually.
I think it does too. It adds that narrative beat without feeling ham-fisted in.
No, not at all. No, it's fun. So we've now, you generate your asset cards. You spend 20 minutes reading through them.
Hopefully not.
And then you issue orders. And now orders are issued to each detachment. You just basically go down your line of detachment. And you have 3 different types of orders you can give to a detachment.
Right. And this is another point where those command units are so important because you actually issue the order to the command unit for the detachment.
Right.
So you're just putting a
token face down without your opponent seeing. So I had 7 detachments, I think, and I'd go put down the 7 tokens face down. You'd put down your 7, and then we go, or 5, or whatever you have.
Right.
And then we go, okay, let's flip them all over, and you go through and flip them all over.
An important rule here is, what if you forget a unit?
I was going to say. Go
yeah,
ahead.
and this is a rule I could see being unpopular with people. In Blood Bowl is kind of famous for
its unforgiving.
Its unforgiving nature.
Yeah.
Blood Bowl has this rule. And this will, some of you as listeners already know where I'm going, and you're starting to get angry at just the mention of where I'm going. And Blood Bowl community groups, if you mention this, there will be 200 comments, and it will be heated every time. It's ridiculous. So in Blood Bowl, there's this rule of from turn to turn, there's a turn counter, and it's the clock on the game. And if you don't move your turn counter, it's now an alternate rule, but one of the old original rules was if you didn't move your turn counter and your opponent caught it, it ended your turn.
Yeah.
Because it's so important that turn counter stay locked up, because there's a finite number of turns to the game. And it can really get weird and screwy if somebody isn't doing it. Well, the problem in this is if you don't put a command down, the next thing you do, or a command token down, the next thing you do between you and your opponent is you guys reveal all the tokens. Well, you can see what every unit's going to roughly be doing. To then have that information and make a choice about what token you're going to put down
unfair.
Is hugely advantageous. Yeah. So if you forget to put a token down, that guy doesn't act. He sits there and does nothing.
So this I found to be...
Or that detachment, and that's the kicker.
That whole detachment
does nothing.
And this I found to be one of the hardest parts of the game, in the sense that there was so much going on, and you have tokens everywhere. You have to be very careful that, like, I've got a token here, I got a token here, I got a token here, I got a token here. And you were fortunately, you realized at one point, hey, you haven't put a token over here, because I had a unit, Helldrake, that was all the way across on your side of the board. I was like, oh, thanks. And then I ran over there and put a token down. And then we revealed everything. I think we had started to reveal, but I was the first one to reveal something. And then you're like, hey, you don't have a token over here.
Right.
Oh, my God. So fortunately, I didn't get caught by that. But I think it's a legitimate...
Yeah, it needs to be enforced. It is, it could be game unbalancing to overlook that.
So here's the thing. There's 3 different token types.
Only 3 orders to issue.
Super easy to remember. There's advance, which means you can move and shoot or move and fight. There is aimed fire, which means you don't move, but you gain a bonus to your shooting of +1 when you shoot. And then there is assault. You move twice your movement rate, and then you fight if you're in base-to-base contact.
Not shoot, just fight.
Just fight. You don't get to shoot unless you have a special card.
Yeah, you do.
Like the orcs do.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, stupid orcs. And that's it. So you go through and you decide what you want each detachment to do. Boy, the assault is huge because some of my units would fly 12, for assault. And next thing you know, I'm moving 24 inches and now I'm in base-to-base contact. So I found that hugely advantageous for my screamers that were able to jump over something. I forgot to do the damage when I flew over the thing with my screamers. Oh man. Anyway, there's like, with the assault thing, you really do get to move quite far. It speeds the game up just based on the fact that you're moving that far.
Right. One of the weird things, I don't know, for me it felt very strange, was that there is no special phase or special action or to move into close combat.
Nope.
If you can move into base to base,
then you're
move into base to base.
There's no, it's not like 40K where you move and then, okay, now I'm going to roll my dice and assault. Nope. Your movement either gets you in or it doesn't. Right. That's that.
And being able to just walk into contact with somebody, I was like, but that's like a big no-no in every other game. But in this, you just walk into combat.
You could, now that I'm thinking about it, going back to your strict rule on you don't get to act, one thing you could do in theory is, since the advance rule is kind of the basic like move and shoot or move and fight, you could say if you have neglected to put down a token, by default you get the advance rule.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean,
you could.
I could already see you going, no, screw you,
I am.
Put down an order or don't.
Right. And I am, because that's kind of tends to be how I am with those things of like, look, it's not that difficult to keep track of. You could. I'm instantly hearing the person go, oh, well, cool, I just won't put any orders down because everybody's advancing. And I'm like,
I thought that too.
You
should
put the orders
strict about it. I'm just saying.
You could. That would be
for your
a
first
very,
couple games. That might
a
be
very gentlemanly way to go
nice
about doing it.
Okay, so now you've placed all your orders
and revealed them all
to each other, and you say, okay, I have the initiative, Jody, so I pick a detachment and I'm going to execute the orders for that detachment. And let's say that that order I gave was the standard advance. So now I'm going to move, just like in 40K, I would move every unit within that detachment, fire or fight if I'm in now base to base, because I chose to get into base to base with a unit, against your units, and see if I hit and see if I cause wounds. And there's a slightly different mechanic to hitting and causing wounds, but it's going to feel familiar.
It'll feel familiar,
especially to
very
hit.
Quickly. Yeah.
D6 is to hit,
and it's
D12 to see if you do damage.
And it's the same numbers you're used to. If you're a Marine, it's on a 3.
Typically.
If you're on an Orc, you're going to hit in close combat on a 3, and you're going to shoot and hit on a 5.
Your Demon Princes are going to hit on 2s.
And re-roll them, because they're Demon Princes.
But then you're going to roll a 12-sided dice, and basically you have two different categories. You either have, how does this attack with this weapon work against people or personnel, and how does it work against vehicles?
Right.
And that's that.
Right.
And usually you can see some variation there. Sometimes it's higher against vehicles, sometimes it's lower. Depends on the weapon you're using.
Right.
Melt-A-Gun would probably be lower against vehicles or something to that effect.
Right. One thing, though, that's really important here is if you've only played 40K, this will be a huge change of thinking about the game.
Yep.
Because, as Carl said, you're going to take one detachment and fully resolve it. But you have 4 or 5 other detachments, and they're just chilling and just waiting.
Because now your opponent's going to go with their detachment, and they're going to do whatever order they've given that one. And then you're going to go to your next detachment and you use yours. And you're going to go back and forth. And in this way, the game's great because you're engaged a lot more.
Right.
Rolls to hit and rolls to wound are completely done on your card. I don't have to compare my strength to your.
At all.
There's none of that. It's very much taking advantage of the Age of Sigmar 40K learning on that piece. But when you cause hits and you cause wounds, you're not actually quite causing wounds yet.
No.
What you're causing is what do they call them? The
blast markers.
Blast markers. So for every, in what 40K we would call a wound that you cause, your opponent takes a blast marker. If you cause 2 wounds, that small blast marker becomes a large blast marker, and then it continues to stack up. And the trick to the game is really sticking as many blast markers as you can on a unit
Right.
at a time, because after all of your actions are taken across the board, everybody's done
For
all
both
their
people.
actions. For both people, you now move into the damage phase.
One thing in the action phase that I think is, we mentioned that like
I actually forgot to mention
it's
something.
mentally less fatiguing
Oh, yeah, wait.
because you're not comparing against each other. Everything is on your own card. Another thing is the number of dice you're rolling
Good point.
is really
Small.
quite small. If I have 10 orcs and they go to attack, I'm rolling 2 dice.
Yep.
1, 2 dice, maybe 3 dice if they're real fancy. I think the most dice in one handful that either of us rolled throughout the entire game was like 12, 15.
And I think that was you.
I think
with
I had
like
a
30 orcs or something attack.
Yeah, and it was but it still was like, oh, this 30 orcs attacks.
I
It's
think
16
the most
dice.
I ever threw was 5 dice at one time. And so you go through, you do all these actions. This is where you're also doing your psychic abilities.
Right.
If you have cards that have psychic abilities for you to use, and once you use that card, it goes into your
It's discarded.
face up desk, goes into your discarded pile. So any cards that you can use during the action phase, you're using these cards during the action phase. And usually those are attacks, or they're like, hey, I'm going to drop an orbital bombardment on you, or I'm going to fire this beam from my tower, or I'm going to shoot a rocket.
I forgot I had a vortex grenade the whole freaking game, and I never threw it.
I had
at
one
you.
in my deck just because you can't have 40k without a vortex.
I know. Well,
Or Apocalypse.
yeah.
So you complete all the actions. Anything I'm missing there?
So one of the big ones, that dice thing, like I can't overstate that. The difference in rolling 16 dice for my 30 orc boys versus 120 dice, and figuring out how many dice.
And the other thing it helps with is there's not a lot of there. Even when you have re-rolling, you're just re-rolling like 1 or 2 dice.
Yep.
It's not a lot.
Yeah, I had one round where I'd stacked 2 or 3 cards on the Stompa all at once, and that felt a little like, oh, this feels like 40k where it's roll this, pick up that, roll 2 more of these, 3 more of those.
But even there, it wasn't bad.
No, it resolves really, really easily. And even though you are dropping these tokens, and I think what the blast tokens are supposed to represent, and it gets into it in the rulebook, is the weight of fire you're throwing into a unit and how suppressed it's becoming, and potentially how damaged it's becoming.
Correct.
Again, though, it's this very abstract thing you're doing.
But this is super important too. And the reason they've done this damage token phase is because nobody likes, and this is one of the big selling points of Apocalypse now, nobody likes to put out their huge super Stompa that they've spent all this time painting, and it just gets blown off the table before you get to do anything.
Right.
You can take 10 large blast wounds to your Stompa. Great. It's now your turn. You activate that unit. You still move forward as usual, and you take your actions. Now everybody's done all their actions. Now we go to the damage phase.
Right.
And in the damage phase, what you're going to do is you're going to see, okay, I have a unit of 10 Space Marines, and they have 2 large blast tokens on them and 1 small blast token on them at this point, because I've taken effectively 5 hits.
Right.
5 successful hits. For every large blast token, I get to roll a d6 for my save. For every small blast token, I get to roll a d12 for my save.
Much better.
Now, these saves are not the same as in 40K.
Whoa, buddy. No, not so much.
They are typically higher. My Rubric Marines had a save of 5+.
Which I was in awe of.
That's a great save.
My orc boys have a 10+.
Yeah. Most of my demons were rocking 8s.
Yeah.
And so when I go to roll a d6 because I have a large blast, well, I just automatically take a wound.
Right.
Like I can't even save that.
Right.
And now once I've taken a wound, I apply a wound marker to the unit.
Right.
Now remember, you're not going to lose individual models out of a unit. You either lose the whole unit or you don't.
Right. And it's not until the unit, whatever the stats for that unit are, that wound total is met, then they're dead and gone. And you just pick up the whole thing and it's done.
And typically this is like 2 or 3 wounds.
Right.
Like that's it. Like there's not a lot.
Right. Unless you're a super heavy, or my Kill-A-Can mob was surprisingly durable. They're not very good, but man, are they durable. They had 6 wounds.
I think Magnus had 4.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Oh, and your Screamer units. It's those mid-range, like those mid-power units that you can have a lot of them, I think.
The Screamer had 9. I had 9 Screamers, so it had like 6 wounds or something like that. But,
until you do all 6, they're there.
Yeah, they're there.
And
and the interesting thing is, so okay, going back to our example of the Space Marines, I've taken 2 large blasts, 1 small blast. I fail 2 saves because I can't make I'm guessing. I don't remember what Space Marine save is. Or let's just say I fail 2 of the large blast saves. I succeed on the small blast save. I'm going to remove the small blast save. But now, as I take the 2 wounds, I also have to make a leadership test.
Right.
Which is a D6 plus the number of blast markers still remaining on my unit.
Plus the number that were ever there.
You
don't remove them until the very, very end.
Okay. So even the one I ignored?
Yep.
Okay.
You were cheating me.
No. I don't recall. So anyway, but that's the variable is the D6 plus the number of blasts on the unit. You're right. It is the
right.
And then what happens is if you roll higher than your leadership, you take another wound.
Right. And when things only have 2-3 wounds, that one more wound may very well be
enough to push you over the edge and take you out. So, your unit will take 2 wounds and then you're gone. You're off the table. My 10-man pink horror units, or just horror units, because they're so genericized.
Yeah.
It could only take 2 wounds.
Yeah.
And as soon as I had 2 wounds, the whole unit was gone. That was it. And that took a little getting used to. Like sometimes you're like, really? But you only took like 2 shots from them.
Right.
And again, it's abstract. It's meant to represent a lot of fire.
Right. And I think that's one of the ways they built some interesting thematic differences into the armies. The orcs, for example, unless it's a massive mob, like one little hit, their leadership's terrible.
Yeah.
So they're gonna take an additional wound. So if you can get, 1 wound here, 1 wound there, you want to be spreading blast tokens all over the place.
Yeah.
And make the orc player just roll leadership saves, because odds are they're gonna fail them at leadership, because most of the orc units are like leadership 4.
Yeah.
So D6, even if you've got a blast token, you're rolling D6 plus 1, and if you roll anything totaling higher than 4, that's an additional wound. And
sure.
I mean, like we said, few units have more than 3 wounds.
Now, some units, like I had some units that, HQs that are standing nearby, you can use their leadership instead of, but that's a special ability called out in that unit. So, you have similar things to 40K in that sense. And
it'll feel similar.
It's not, there's not going to, it's going to feel 40K-ish, but it is an entirely different game. And so then you start removing units from the table.
Yeah, you do.
And that's the way it goes. And then as soon as that's done, you start again from the beginning.
One of the things you mentioned that Loopy had pointed out to you about the damage phase that's kind of interesting is and assumably if you're playing this big of a game, you're playing with somebody you trust, you guys can really do that independently.
Yep.
You can just, both people can start rolling through things. I'm going to play this card. I'm going to do this thing. Okay. Oh, this unit's gone. Oh, that unit's gone. Oh, okay. That's gone.
Yeah. By the time we were in our second round, the first round, we wanted to just see how it all worked out. And by the second round, we were just rolling our own damage stuff and then removing units that lost it or applying wounds as necessary.
And there is an effect, I think, in the game of where the first turn, you're not going to see a ton of units getting pulled unless somebody has a lot of really small units.
Or super long range shooting with a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Right. But then what's going to happen is these blast tokens are going to slowly, we didn't even touch on that. So you make your armor saves.
Yep.
Then you take your morale test. Yep. And assuming the unit's still there, you clear all of the blast markers off. So at the end of the turn,
you have a clean slate.
Yeah. There will be damage markers on things, wound markers, but not blast markers at all.
There's also the sense of, if you're at half your number of wounds, you're extremely wounded, but it really only affects heavy weapons.
Right.
Right. It's actually not that much of a
Basically, penalty. Stuff's going to stay at full combat effectiveness until it's gone.
For the most part. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, again, a very not normal 40K thing.
No. But so, I mean, and that's kind of it. Then you clear the markers, you start again, you lay down your orders, you keep going and just repeat. You roll initiative each round.
Yep.
There are cards that allowed me to, hey, you're going to activate this unit. No, wait, I'm going to activate this, formation before yours, or detachment before you get to do. So I basically got a double turn.
Something I had a lot of in my deck that I never really needed to use, but was interesting, like just thought wise, was the ability to switch my orders. Like once placed, I could like go, oh, nope, I want these guys to advance instead of charge. Oh, nope, I want these guys to charge instead of advance.
For me in one case, I had a lot of cards because of my psychic stuff that was like, you can look at the top 9 cards of your deck and then put them back in any order you want, or you can look at your opponent's cards on their deck and then put them back in whatever order you want, or you can look at what cards your opponent has in their hands. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Right.
So there's like a lot of kind of meta rules in there too that are really about the mechanics of what you have in your hand and that kind of thing. I thought were fun. So,
Yeah,
but I never
again,
ended
that
up doing
flavor.
it because I didn't want to read more cards.
Yeah.
At that point.
So much reading.
I think I'll discard this one. Sounded good at the time when I took it. So what are based on all that, what would you say are the benefits of the new system?
For me, the biggest benefit is that mental fatigue thing. Like I can't get over the fact that we
just played a whole game.
We've been at this literally for 12 hours today. And I am thinking in the past,
you're thinking, let's re-rack
a little bit.
No way.
Except I already put my army away. So that's 2 hours from now to get it back out. No, but in the past, when I'd played in Apocalypse games, literally playing for 12 hours straight to get through 3, maybe 4 turns.
Yeah.
And that's assuming it wasn't a super heavily run event like we would have in the past. But literally 12-hour days to play a single game of Apocalypse. And by this time of night, not being able to form a coherent sentence any longer.
You just want to be done.
And just my brain is
And you may not even
exhausted
want to play 40K again for a while.
for a bit. And I do not have that.
No.
And I think it's tied to some really specific mechanical issues.
Okay.
The reduced number of dice. When you are placing orders for your entire army, which feels a little daunting, but it's kind of a fun.
It's actually
daunting.
pretty easy.
You have 3 options.
Yep.
You're making the same 3 choices over and over
And
and over.
most of the time, like if you're playing an assaulty type of army, you're mostly putting down assault tokens so you can get up there faster.
My first 2 turns, I played
my
a lot
first 2 turns were a lot of the move and shoot.
Yep.
With my heavy weapons guys sitting back with the aim.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then as you draw closer, I'm like, all right, maybe I'm going to assault with this unit.
Yep.
It was very easy to decide.
Yeah.
And Alan used to talk about this. Alan Bly used to talk about this. And John French has talked with me about this too. And I think I've mentioned it on the show before about the number of decisions you have to make during a game. Like there's a sweet spot for that. If you're having to make, and in 7th edition, I think you were having to make way too many decisions at a certain point that it became exhausting and the flow gets broken. 8th edition 40K streamlined a lot of that so that the decisions you had to make each round became a little bit less. I think this streamlines it even more so. And that's probably why the mental exhaustion is not quite there. Like we just played through it. We learned it and played through it. And I would say at this level, we played 320, 325 power level. If we were to play this again, not right now, but if we were to play this again, knowing what we know now, coming prepared with our lists and how we're going to have them, the second longest thing would be you unpacking your army. But beyond that, I think we could knock out that game in 4 hours.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If not faster.
Yeah.
Especially if we had movement trays.
Especially if we had movement. Well, yeah, moving 120 boys still takes a while.
It was funny that you'd move like the front row and you just get behind and just push all the others forward without knocking them over.
My old tournament days came into play there. Where's the front edge? Where's the back edge? Okay, everybody else just fill in.
Yep. So, I think for sure, I think that's not something I listed, but the level of exhaustion, I was very concerned about recording after we played because I knew, like, oh, there's that, we're going to be exhausted. We're not going to want to do it. But no, I mean, it's been actually, I really appreciate you sticking around and recording, but it hasn't, like, I don't feel exhausted.
No, I'm strangely jazzed by the whole thing of like, were it not the reality of like, no, it would take like 4 or 5 hours, I'd be like, no, I'm down to play some more Apocalypse.
Yeah.
It's built off a rule system that I've known and loved for a long time, but it is its own animal. No question about it. It's not that if you played that old Epic Space Marine, this is different. If you played Epic Warhammer 40,000, this is different. There's things borrowed from those and inspiring, but it's different. And it keeps you engaged. That's another benefit.
A huge benefit of this game.
My God, thinking back to old Apocalypse games and literally going, I don't really need to be here for an hour.
And you know what? Here's the thing. Like in 40K, I build an army. I can build an army with 1 battalion detachment. And often I do, right? I'm just like, oh, here's how everything fits in my battalion. Maybe I have a second detachment, but pretty rarely. Here, when I say, okay, I've built like this one detachment that's a battalion detachment, even though I'm going to activate and use that whole thing, I it's not truly like I think you're making a mistake if you fill out every slot of that battalion detachment, right? Because you're going to find your opponent is way more flexible than you are. Yeah, sure, you'll get to shoot everything and move everything in that one round, but they're gonna way have more flexibility than you.
Right. And we had that happen in our game where I moved that dread mob detachment forward.
Yeah.
And then you charged it and they'd activated. My guys had done what they were going to do. So there wasn't going to be a retaliation because they're totally done.
There is no, I fight you, now you get to fight back. It's, I fight you, you don't have a turn anymore.
Right.
Good luck next time.
And the reality was I should have waited and pulled you forward. I would have gotten a lot more mileage out of that. But the same thing on the other flank, when I charged all those orc trucks forward and was able to kind of bottleneck and, lock you up behind a bunch of trucks and rhinos.
And I could never get to the objective.
Right. Yeah. That it created a wall. And it was like, so, give and take. But that level of thought and back and forth of the game, I think is really interesting.
And it is a very different strategy than 40K.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's the interesting thing is it's like it's on another level.
Yeah.
And it feels that way. It feels like I'm operating a whole army as opposed to a force in an army.
Right.
And it feels like that.
Yeah, and this has always been my favorite thing is when my old group that I played Apocalypse with a lot, when we got really good at Apocalypse, the most important thing we realized was individual units don't matter.
Right.
That like when you start seeing Apocalypse in that way, that that's Magnus. Man, that's cool. He doesn't matter.
No, not really.
It's just Magnus.
He wasn't as pivotal as he would be in a 40K game.
Not even close.
In a 40K game, that guy is a freaking beast. That's not to say he was a wimp.
No.
Like he tore up some stuff, but then he went down.
He
actually he had one win left.
He got mobbed by a lot
of stuff.
And most units wouldn't have even been able to handle that.
No.
And he lived through it for a round.
Because his saves were so low.
Right.
Yeah.
But that notion of that an individual unit really doesn't matter. And this rule set really does an awesome job of going, no, it's just, again, I keep using this term system, that it is your battle line. You're in charge of the whole army, and it's how is the army working within itself.
And the interesting thing to that is I'm one of those people that constantly is complaining about why are we so focused on characters all the time? Like the universe is massive. Right. Why does Rubute Gilliman mean that much in such a massive universe? And yeah, of course he has influence and those kinds of things, but I think that plays out on the tabletop here, where you have characters and you're like, yeah, he's an important character and he's dead. And you're like, okay, but that doesn't end my game. I mean, he's just a character in the massive war that's going on. It really is interesting.
Right. You don't read a story where it's like, here's, the Grand Wog of whatever, the Grand Wog of Warlord, whoever the hell.
Chuck,
Warlord Chuck, the mighty. And, Magnus jumps out in front and charges the entire army and decimates it.
Right.
No, the Wa would swallow him and beat him down. They don't tell that story because it wouldn't be believable.
Correct.
It
wouldn't be dramatic.
No, and this system actually does that. It's like, no, I know he's Magnus and he's amazing, or it's Ahriman. You can't just run them out into the entire battle line. They'll get swallowed up.
Fast.
Yeah, and they wouldn't do that narratively.
Right,
and I think that's maybe what I'm really enjoying is
I agree with you.
Stories that this system creates fit the stories I read, fit the stories I get in my codex, it feels right at this grand scale.
Yeah.
Whereas at a small scale, if my squad of 10 Marines runs into Magnus, he should obliterate them with his mind bullets.
Yeah. Yeah.
He shouldn't be close. He should mop the floor with them.
So let's talk about available for the system currently.
Yeah.
There's the box set, the starter box set. There's extra cards you can buy for that box set. There is cards for each. There are they're cards, but they're larger. They're the unit
data
cards.
Slate,
your little data slates for each force that is out there. Now, mind you, those you can download for free, PDFs right from the Warhammer 40K website. You can print them out. Like that's all available free. So you don't actually have to go buy all those cards. I did notice some units missing. Heralds of Tzeentch are not present. apparently.
Defcoptas,
We found Defcoptas.
but not a card within the.
No, we had.
Oh, right. The heralds just don't exist.
They just flat out don't exist.
I can't help but wonder if that's an oversight because the other gods have heralds.
There's at least one in there. There's a Herald of Slaanesh. Yeah, but I didn't see a Herald of Khorne. I don't see a Herald of Nurgle or and I'm curious as to why you chose not to include those. Okay. There are movement trays that they sell. I think they're a little on the pricey side, but man, are they handy.
Yeah.
Man, are they handy. I'm glad I have a 3D printer. Let me just say.
Yeah. Whenever this gets racked again, because I know Matt's also really gung-ho for he and I to sit down and do this.
Yeah.
Thanks again, buddy. Matt was letting me use his set because it's true. I think when this came out, there was, I think even from GW, they were saying, if you have 2 or 3 friends, one person can buy the great big
set.
card box. Yeah. You're good.
Yeah, for sure.
You don't need, everybody definitely does not need their own.
No, not at all. And it's $100 box set, but it comes with 300 cards in it and the bunch of the 12-sided dice and all the tokens you need.
It's everything.
All and more of the tokens you need.
But if when I do this again, I'm going to have movement trays. It just would have been so much easier.
Especially for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, I think that there's still value to old supplements for Apocalypse, even thematic and storytelling and battle waging, maps and deployment zones and that kind of thing. There's still a lot of old, like the Apocalypse war zones that they used to release in the hardback. I still think those are incredibly valuable and can be used here. Now the rule book itself actually has, much like the
Kill Team,
the war cards that you set up for 40K, you set up your open war set. They have rules for basically setting up kind of open war scenarios in Apocalypse, which I thought is great because the mileage you get on that, and there's like D12 tables for objectives and for twists and those kinds of things. I mean, the mileage you get out of that is tremendous.
Agreed. I will say this, though. There are a couple items in that initial lineup that I feel like are kind of mandatory.
Yeah.
Like do you have to buy them? No. There's a lot of you don't have to buy it here.
Right.
I mean, Toy Soldier Hobby don't
None
have
of
to
it
buy
you
any.
have to buy.
But to really get the most out of it, there's a lot of you could work around it on the cheap.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to do this and have it be as enjoyable and easy as possible, and you can spend a little bit of money, I think buying the faction card set that has your data cards on it, you're going to want to have those. One of the things I did is I took those cards and I lined them up on the side
you had
of the
them laid
table.
out
And
really
so when
well.
I wanted
almost like
to
a
go,
solitaire game, right?
Yeah. And what I do is when I'd go, I'm going to go down to the other end of the table and do my Outrider detachment. Well, let me grab all those cards because they're stacked up like in a row like solitaire and my dice tray, and I'm going to go down there and I can roll through it. And then I'd go put it back. And then Dan and Campbell were just talking about this in one of their episodes about speeding up play and like sorting your dice. And so the next time I wanted to move another detachment, I'd have those while you were taking your turn, because I don't have to do a much while you're activating a detachment.
Right.
But it's not going to take very long. I can gather the cards I need for next time, go get them ready.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to activate this unit and I have, my command assets ready to go that I'm going to take. And I know what I'm going to do, which even further speeds up at this massive scale, this huge game, but I can really snap through things. So I think having those unit cards.
I wish I could say I was as organized as you were, but I didn't have the Thousand Suns cards. I had the Chaos Space Marine cards. That kind of screwed me up.
But you set up the entire room, so I figured I could get my ducks in a row
There's that
otherwise. So having those cards, I feel like you really kind of want to have those.
Yeah. I agree. They are very helpful.
Working through those in a digital format is really going to be
especially because it's a PDF. So you're just looking after page after page after page to get to the page you want.
Right.
Yeah. If you printed them out and you just have sheets, that's one thing. That actually might be easy, especially if you could create a packet for each of your detachments because you can duplicate up cards if you need to.
Yeah.
And then you could just go, here's my packet for this detachment, that might be pretty easy too.
Yeah. So something like that you're going to need to do. So either, it's always time or money, right?
Yep.
So either you're going to need to take the time to print those out,
or you're going to spend the money,
or spend the money to buy the cards. I was thrilled I had the cards.
They were handy.
And then of course we've made a big deal about those command asset cards. Somebody has to have them. And honestly, if you're going to play this regularly, you need to get a box. Because,
just buy the
because
box.
there's the default,
Tokens.
the generic ones, the tokens.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean that box has enough tokens for 2 people.
Yep.
Unless the game's truly
Massive. Yeah.
But
500,
the
600.
generic
points.
command asset cards, there's not 2 of everything in there.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to.
Well, they actually give rules for if you want to use, and you're both using the same card, like they explain how to do that. So
Right.
it's kludgy.
You're gonna want a physical.
Yeah.
And yeah. So it's weird. Like you can do it without forking out all that money. You can absolutely do that. But I think if you're really wanting to enjoy this and not be fighting against it, you're gonna want to buy those items
a little.
Yeah.
I mean, that's they didn't make a
game you
free
didn't-
product that you're
And
not going to buy. Yeah.
Fair though, like I absolutely felt as I was playing that anytime I was using a doodad, I was like, I'm glad I have this.
Yep.
I am glad I have
Yeah,
this.
I nothing felt like, oh, well, this was kind of a waste.
Right.
Except maybe the objective tokens, because we have like well-designed objectives and that
Right.
kind of thing. So that wasn't so big of a deal. I will say, going back to the rule book too, because we really only scratched the surface with kind of one mission. There are also war zones that have different effects in them and that kind of thing. They've really, it's a great launching point. Like that rule book is solid. It is not terribly thick.
No.
The rules are actually pretty, like once you see how it works,
6
it's
pages.
pretty easy.
Yeah. I mean like 12, like are you counting fronts and backs or not? But
And in the very back of the rule book, there is a step-by-step walkthrough of each turn and a page reference of where the rules are for that.
Yeah, it's a good
which
reference.
was very, very handy.
GW I feel like has gotten a little bit away from the one page. They used to almost always give you the like hard card tack. What am I thinking?
Cardstock.
Cardstock. Oh, maybe we're more tired than I think. The cardstock reference page. I do miss that. Like it would be nice to have that.
for
But
sure.
I mean, wish listing. It's a good deal. Oh, we didn't even talk about terrain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's terrain rules, but it's basically there's like 3 terrain rules and
And they work.
it's super simple.
To get the cover from terrain, which gives you basically makes you a little harder to hit. Let's say a ruin, you kind of have to embark into the ruin like a vehicle. Like you're within 6 inches of it. You say, I move into the ruin. You put your guys on the ruin. Okay, great. And then when you want to move out of the ruin, you have to disembark from the ruin, putting your guys 6 inches out from it, all within 6 inches. And then that's it. That's your movement for that round.
Which thematically could do some really cool stuff. Like we had the cathedral in the middle of ours. You could almost like if you had a big manufactorum, like you could occupy the ruin because you literally that's what's called. You occupy the defensible terrain, and then your guys when they disembark just jump out the other end. So if it was a huge piece,
You could actually launch yourself ahead. You kind of slingshot.
right. Which
When you had
I
that
don't-
guy in the cathedral on the bottom floor, if you hadn't killed my flamers, the next move was my flamers were jumping over into that terrain, and I was going to flame them down that staircase.
I would have been sad because that was a battalion that was stretched really thin.
I
That was a
know.
long, thin green line.
So, the game plays very well. It plays very well. I do have to admit, when we first started and I was like setting up my list, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like this. Like, because it was just very counter to what I was kind of expecting. But as we started playing, I'm like, I see exactly what they were doing here. I really, really like this. Again, I would not play it on the regular. To me, it's an event thing.
Right.
Like I wouldn't be like, hey, we're gonna get together every weekend and play Apocalypse. Nah, probably not.
Probably.
Just because of the setup and prep that is required for it to be smooth. I can get a game of 40K in much easier, like kind of just bring your stuff over, let's play, table setup, we go. This involves way more setup than that. But once
Truly.
it's set up, it plays very smooth.
Yeah, really, really smoothly. You brought up an interesting question during our last break. We were talking about, well, what about with multiple players?
Yeah.
And I think your point was right on. You're gonna slow down with multiple players, but not any more so than you would anytime you start playing a team game.
What's going to happen is you're going to sit there, you're going to place all your orders. You may even have a little discussion about, well, should I have those guys assault? Should I have those guys blah, 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 whatever. Okay, then you place all your orders. Then you go to activate. So now it's our turn. And it's me and Adon on this side. It's like Adon may go, well, I would move this unit. Should I move this unit? Adding that discussion slows everything down. Team games always take longer.
Right.
Just as a result of that. But to your point, I don't think it's going to slow down any more than any other type of discussion.
Right. And I think that back and forth detachment activation process is going to start straining a little bit if you've got 6, 7, 8 players going on one table.
For sure.
Maybe more so than the old version. The trade-off is, though, in the old version, if you have 6, 7, 8 players on each side of the table, you're talking about an hour to 2 hours in between switching people's turns.
For sure.
And here you're talking, you shouldn't be more than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, really shouldn't be. So
the other thing I would say is with multiple players, then as you go through the damage thing, you at least have a 2-man rule where, I'm spot checking you, rolling your damage stuff, and you don't have to worry about the opponents can all do theirs and you can do yours, and then you're done. Right.
Yeah.
And then if you're not on familiar ground like you and I, like at least well, if they're cheating, it's both those guys that are cheating,
But I can't, this game, I'm like, I can't imagine playing with somebody I wasn't really familiar with.
No.
And I've always felt that with Apocalypse. So like, man, it's weird when you're playing Apocalypse and the person on the other side of the table, you don't really know.
Adon did a real good job of running events like that. And that's because he kind of ran all that. But I've also played in Apocalypse games where it's just like we show up and then I'm like, this is a disaster.
Yeah.
I think
there's
way more structure to this.
Yeah. I think it would be hard to have that. Like if people just show up for a massive Apocalypse game, I think this would run fine. It's just that it's going to slow down just because of additional people.
For sure. Jeff keeps asking, can you play this as 40K? I think you can.
You can.
Sure.
So I think there's one hurdle.
Yep.
And you're going to have to, you're going to house rule it. And I don't know how, because the game is built around multiple detachments.
Yep.
A small scale game of 40K, frankly, would be one of these detachments. Like a regular game of 40K for me might very well be,
maybe two.
A spearhead or two.
Maybe 3.
Right. And man, that is not getting the full out of this system.
No.
This system wants you to have 6, 7, 8, 9 attachments.
For sure.
So you're going to have to figure out a way to create more activations. So, I mean, and if you're immediately sitting there going, well, you could just do it like that. Good, do that.
Knock yourself out. But I don't think that's how I would want to play.
But you're going to have to house rule it.
Yeah.
Now, I get why people would want to.
Sure.
You aren't
the back and forth activation.
The back and forth. You aren't into Hero Hammer.
Right.
You don't like that every unit has lots and lots of special rules because in this, most units have 1, maybe 2, and they're very universal. So if that's a style and you like that abstraction of battle, you like something.
Knock yourself out.
I think it's a fantastic system.
Yeah.
But
I think where it shines is at the bigger game.
Yeah, because of those detachments.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know how you're going to get around that without really doing some custom house ruley kind of stuff.
Agreed.
And, and I think for the work you're going to put into that, you're going to spend a lot more time figuring that out than you would just playing a game of 40K.
I think so too.
But it's a great rule system.
Curious to hear about people that have played it like that and what their results were. So
absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that's kind of sums up our thoughts on it. I'm really glad we got to play.
Yeah, and
I really am. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Optimistic to play again.
Yeah, for sure. I think I could see us doing like a big game day here with 4 people on a side, but we would complete it in a day for sure.
Oh yeah,
and the other thing is we would be able to tell people now, okay, March 21st is the day we are playing Apocalypse. We have 4 people per side. Here are the things you need to come prepared with.
Right.
Your lists of detachments. You're going to want your 30 card deck already selected and be familiar with it. Be ready to set up and go. That's,
Well, the other thing is, so from somebody, sorry, I'm going to segue a little bit here, but from somebody who ran a lot of these events. So say you are having a team game.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to, much like you do in the rules, you designate a warlord.
Yeah.
That is of your various commanders, your boss,
We didn't
bosses.
even mention that.
Yeah, one of them is your supreme commander.
Right.
And usually he exists for if he dies, you get a point.
Right.
I mean, he's walking around with a
He's
little...
the Slay the Warlord guy.
Yeah, he's the Slay the Warlord guy.
Mine was Magnus.
I tried, man.
You came close.
Almost got that head. But, having somebody designated, maybe in a team game, you still only have one 30-card deck.
Yeah, it's possible.
And it's the commander's job to curate the deck for the entire faction.
It would help if people were playing similar factions, but if you had a wide variety of factions, that would be a real problem.
Yeah, but that's a lame way to play 40K.
I'm just saying.
Some people choose to do that, I'm aware.
They could be Trader Guard. They could be. We would not do that. We would
that
set
was
up
effectively
a thematic.
Your faction was that, though.
Yes.
Today. It was a soup.
No, it was 2.
It was demons and Thousand Suns.
Yeah.
Right? But that's what I'm saying is like you built your deck out of those too. So if we're playing versus somebody...
I took about 10 generic cards and then like kind of 10.
Right, but I'm saying the commander for each team could be responsible for building one deck, and that would help
Or
streamline things.
it might be interesting to increase the size of that deck if you have that many
10
players,
per player.
Right? And then, and then, because then you're likely, hey, I may get a draw this round for my guys. Maybe I won't.
Right.
Or I get a generic, there's a lot you could do with it. There's a lot like you do.
And I think with the team aspect, that would help. Yeah. Hey, Aaron and Josh, sort your stuff out, you Necron filthy swine. And
some demons are ready to take you on.
We got some demons to kill you.
All right. Well, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back, and we're going to close out the show. So thank you so much for joining us for episode 201.
201
of the Independent Characters, man. And what a way to start the next century of characters.
I guess you could say we went big.
We did. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I think I've kind of said everything. The one thing I would emphasize is, again, I think the rule book that you get for this is a good value for its money. You're paying $100 for that box set, and then you get the rule book in that box set. I don't know if you can buy the rule book separate. I don't believe so. But the book itself has a lot of information in it beyond just the rules, like different ways to play and different battle zones and lots of very
There's
cool
a campaign
stuff
in there.
Oh yeah, lots of a campaign example that you could play out that campaign, but it shows you how to build one. Super. I think it's a great value.
Yeah.
I think it's a great value.
I think the notion of being able to play a 300, 400, 500 point game power level of game of 40K and doing so in a reasonably timely fashion, and the entirety of it is on 10 roughly pages of rules.
Yeah, it's pretty
That's
darn good.
impressive.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And what I would say is if you have a 300, 400, 500 power level worth of models in your collection, $100 for this is a small percentage of your total cost.
Yeah, I don't know. Stop grousing. You already sold your soul. You got nothing left, buddy.
Okay, so as you know, you can get the show on iTunes. If that's where you get it, please do leave us a review on iTunes. We love to read those. We have a Facebook group which is incredibly popular, incredibly positive, and just a lot of fun to hang out in, where we talk about these things such as the elite choice at the beginning of the show. There's just a plethora of great painting and different skill levels and all kinds of really cool stuff in there.
It's a great place to enjoy the hobby.
Yeah, for sure. And we curate it so that it stays that way. And then, we have a Patreon. Again, I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but for different levels, you can get involved in our ongoing campaign. You get an additional episode a month of the Independent Characters. It's usually a little shorter. It's usually about an hour to an hour and a half, but it's some good conversation. And
and hey, Patreon
it helps.
Patreon members, thank you, because after 13 hours of being here, sorry, Shell, my
wife has been very
tolerant of me being in her home.
She loves you.
My back was tired,
Yeah.
and this chair, I feel great.
I'm telling you.
So thank you.
Chairs.
Thank you very much, Patreon members.
Yeah. I mean, we use the Patreon dollars. Everybody's benefiting from it because of the better sound equipment, that kind of thing. But also it allows these guys to sit and record a little bit longer, sit at the table and play a little bit longer. We've got Adepticon coming up, which we are all excited about. We're going to have almost everybody from our hosting group at that Adepticon. So I'm also setting up, by the way, a Wednesday evening after the GW release sneak peek. We're getting a room where the ICs and maybe a few others podcasters are going to be, probably Dan and Campbell as well as a few others, can meet and hang out with people and just meet and greet and that kind of thing. Maybe we'll do some games or something. We'll figure out some entertaining things to do there. So there will be more information coming on that before Adepticon. We'll tell you where to go and when to be there. So that'll be fun.
Good times.
All right. So this is Carl.
This is Jody.
And we're coming to you from the Astronomicon, where the big guns never tire.
And the hour grows late but glory grows nigh.
Nice. All right. We will talk again soon. This episode of The Independent Characters is protected by the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find information on the front page at theindependentcharacters.com.